Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Public Accountability Meeting for September. We've got an interesting agenda. I'm going to kick off in a minute with some questions from members of the public, and I'm just looking in terms of other further actions. So I think we're in a position, Simon, if you'd like to put some questions up, and I think we have joining us the Assistant Chief Constable, Mark Pannoni, who's going to answer these questions for us. And looking at the screen, I wonder if Mark has actually got through. I think he's...
We're there. We're there.
Are you there, Mark?
Yes. Afternoon, Commissioner. Afternoon, everyone. Mark Pannoni, Assistant Chief Constable here. I see that we've got some questions online. The first one is about motorcycles and what are we doing about excessive motorcycle exhaust noise in the Yorkshire Dales. We are acutely aware that we have got a exhaust noise nuisance, and there is a fad at the moment with people having exceptionally loud exhausts, which are frustrating, antisocial and annoying. We're looking to take a couple of options here. First of all is we're looking at asking members of the public to, where you see inappropriate and antisocial driving, feed that into us through our website on what we call Operation Spartan, which you'll be able to Google easily on the North Yorkshire Police website. But we're also looking at some innovation following national innovation and looking at noise cameras. And these noise cameras basically can be positioned anywhere where we know there's a problem. We will be monitoring the output put out by these motorcycles and take enforcement action and education action as well to prevent it from happening. So it's about prevention, deterrence, but it's also about enforcement where we feel people are being inappropriately antisocial. And we do not want the Yorkshire Dales to be ruined by noise nuisance, which is unnecessary. And where people are deliberately putting sort of loud cherry bomb type devices on their exhaust, it's of no benefit to anyone, and we do want to stop that.
Okay, thank you, Mark. And if I could just add to that, these cameras have been successfully deployed in Kensington and Chelsea, and we're looking at whether they can actually be replicated and installed in North Yorkshire, because the terrain is slightly different and there are structural issues in terms of sort of bases and things that they need. But that is one of the options we're looking at. And we have another question, Assistant Chief Constable, and it's about the community speed watch in, I think it's Whiteley.
Yes. So we've had a situation in this county where we have had either community speed watches or we have safety camera vans in any one specific location. And the reason for that was to make sure that we either went for a preventative, educational and proactive approach with the speed watches, and then we'd have the safety camera vans if for some reason the community speed watches weren't appropriate. And sometimes where you've got very fast roads, it's not right that members of the public are out there, because it can be dangerous for the individuals who are engaging in that. So for instance, in Whiteley, we've had safety camera vans, and we have them regularly throughout the year. But there's a desire for community speed watch there, and what we're looking to do now is to take that blended approach where we'll have both the speed watch and the safety camera vans, and take probably a joined up approach, whereas in the past we've had a mindset of we do one or the other for good reason. But I think we can do something better for that community. And so that's what I want to work with those community members through our road policing group to achieve that.
Excellent. And we have a question 3 here, which is motorists flashing to avoid the camera safety van, which is the same area. Technically flashing at other motorists when a safety camera van's there is perverting the course of justice. It is a criminal offence. However, there is also a view that actually demonstrating that road safety is an issue, and that the police are taking action. It can also be seen as a positive thing. I don't know if you want to take that further, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in reality, for me, we want to stop speeding, and we want to stop speeding wherever we can, for the simple reason that speeding is one of the fatal 5 which causes deaths and serious injury on our road when we have road traffic collisions. Now, personally, I do not object to motorists flashing to warn there's a camera safety van. The reason for that is because we proactively say where our camera the safety camera vans are, we tell them anyway. And all I'm seeing here is that the community are doing the same, and they are warning where the safety camera vans are as well. You're absolutely right. There is an offence specifically of obstructing a constable if an individual is speeding and they're trying to stop that person from being prosecuted. But I think education here is the most important thing, that we make sure that people understand the dangers of speeding, and whatever we can do to do that, I support it. So, and we've all seen it where people are flashing to say that there's a safety van coming up, everyone slows down. That's what we're trying to achieve. This is not about money making. This is very much about reducing the risk of deaths and serious injuries on our road. So for me, I support the community supporting our efforts to keep our roads safe.
Excellent. Okay, good. We have a question 4. We also have a question 5, which came in very late, but we'll pick up on. Well, I'll cover question 5. We'll pick up on that in a second. So we have a relatively detailed question on wildlife crime, which it'd be great, Assistant Chief Constable, if you could pick up on that.
Okay, so as we know, fox hunting, hare coursing, all forms of animal sports are contentious. And we need to make sure that we police events appropriately and make sure that we are making sure that people stay lawful and are acting within the law. The question was whether we have a wildlife crime officer. Yes, we have many wildlife crime officers. We have 34 trained officers, as well as the Royal Task Force. And of course, obviously, today's main presentation is on the Royal Task Force and how we police wildlife crime. Those individuals are trained specifically in how we police fox hunting, making sure that they understand the law around fox hunting, and trying to make sure that the tensions that quite often occur around fox hunting are policed and managed appropriately. There's a huge responsibility here to get it right, because when the police get it wrong, and we've seen this nationally, then it raises tensions and it generates real frustrations by either or both sides of the agendas. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that we've got sufficient people who understand the law and know the individuals involved on both sides properly, and make sure that we are policing it effectively and proportionately. Fox hunting continues to generate discussion about how it should be policed, and we're making sure that linking in with the National Rural Crime Network, with the National Farmers Union, with SAB organisations, saboteur organisations, and with Masters of Hunting and others, we ensure that we understand the full picture for North Yorkshire and police it proportionately, sensitively, and in accordance with law. But what we need is further engagement from the community. If the community can tell us what's happening, when it's happening, and what their concerns are, we can have an effective response. But we do need that engagement. And I think it's fair to say that historically that engagement, sometimes from either or both sides, has been lacking. But there are offences here, and we do police them.
Okay, thank you very much for a comprehensive answer there, Mark. So we have one last question here, which I'm just going to pick up on. I should be able to pick up on. Yeah. So this is a question, it's a late question. It's from the Stray Ferret. They tried to email it through and apparently they didn't get through. So it came through this morning. I've spoken to the Chief Constable, and Lisa's going to give a quick overview in terms of this and then do a more detailed response afterwards. So the question is, we've been told by North Yorkshire Police that emails to its news desk are only monitored from 9 AM to 5 PM on Mondays to Thursdays, 9 AM to 4:30 on Fridays, and not at all at weekends. Outside these hours, the media should call 101, and if the management team in the control room deems necessary, it will contact the out-of-hours on-call media officer. And then it goes on to say, we understand police budgets are tight and the press team receive lots of inquiries. Nevertheless, this does seem to be an unsatisfactory solution in a digital era. And it quotes an example of something that happened late at night in Harrogate with an incident around the cinema. So the question is it possible to help the police media team so it is better resourced to respond to out-of-hours media coverage? And I think the Chief Constable is going to pick up on this question.
No, thank you, Commissioner. Firstly, I'll apologise. There's a very noisy lawnmower outside the window where I am. So if you can hear some background noise, I do apologise. So thank you for your question. I would start by saying we are a 24/7 organisation. So where there is a need to protect the public or keep them safe, we will respond to those incidents 24/7. So last year, on consideration of our statutory responsibilities, which include preserving life and property and protecting people, and our strategic direction in terms of keeping people safe and making them feel safe, and our police and crime plan priorities in respect of our care objectives, the head of communications reviewed our media and comms policies. And as a result of that review, media contact, as you have already described, has been provided in that way, Monday to Friday at the news desk, and then of course 24/7 our control room are open, and our control room inspector would take calls and make an assessment of whether it was appropriate to call out somebody from the media and comms or press team. So for that reason, a policy was put in place. The head of communications did have a meeting with all of the relevant press agencies at the time to share that new policy and to answer any questions about that policy and how things would work going forward. And we have had subsequent queries in respect of that policy that the head of communications has responded to. So we will respond to you in more detail outside of this meeting, given the time that we have here. And so your specific query will be answered outside of this, but basically that policy was put in place last summer to achieve our strategic direction and also meet our statutory responsibilities.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief Constable. So that moves on from all the questions we've received this month, and we're now going to move into a presentation on rural crime, and we're delighted to be joined by Chief Inspector Alex Butterfield, who is going to lead the presentation, I think. I think you're muted, Alex. No, you're remuted.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
We'll have a better start. We'll say now's the start and go from there. Good afternoon, everybody. It's Chief Inspector Alex Butterfield from the Specialist Ops Directorate. One of the departments that I'm responsible for is our Rural Task Force, and I'm pleased to present today on our approach to rural crime. I'm just going to share the presentation now, if you just bear with me. Right, hopefully that'll be coming on the screen shortly. Brilliant. So today we're going to present a strengths, challenges, opportunities, aims and results presentation, and there are a number of key things that we'll cover during this presentation, but some reassurances around are North Yorkshire Police officers aware of major crimes and problems affecting rural communities? Do NYP officers have a good understanding on the impact of COVID-19 and associated lockdowns on our rural communities? North Yorkshire officers are actively engaging and maintaining two-way communication with diverse rural communities. And finally, the NYP are allocating adequate resources, including the Rural Task Force, to effectively support victims and prevent crimes in rural locations. So if we focus on, to begin with, strengths, the first strength that we identify and what works well is, which is quite unique in North Yorkshire, not many rural forces have this, is an understanding of what actually rural crime demand looks like in North Yorkshire. Because of national crime recording systems, they're not very user-friendly when trying to extract data and understand rural crimes. They're effectively hidden within other incidents. So since the creation of the Rural Task Force, there's a rural crime coordinator who is able to trawl those systems and pull out a demand picture for North Yorkshire. So we are in a unique situation. Not many forces have provided that dedicated resource and insight into pulling what rural crime looks like in North Yorkshire. I'll talk a little bit later of what that looks like and bring that into the presentation. But what that does, that Rural Task Force demand product, is then shared and discussed locally with our command areas, so that the command areas also understand what unique rural policing challenges are happening. What we've also got as a strength within the Rural Task Force is actually the experience, and also the fact that a number of our Rural Task Force officers are from the farming community and rural communities and farm currently, or are part of farming families, which really gives us that unique insight and understanding of those communities, and that helps us really understand what our approaches should be, and what's affecting us and what's current in our communities of the worries. The second point is around good rural and farming community links through neighbourhood policing and the Rural Task Force. We're a neighbourhood policing force. It's the backbone of what we do, and that's enhanced by the Rural Task Force's presence in each of the command areas. We've through that local contact, we have the neighbourhood policing beat managers who have geographical responsibilities, and in a lot of the cases, they're our most experienced officers who develop long-standing relationships with our communities and with our kin networks. And we're seeing, for example, in Rydale, those teams being co-located with the Rydale District Council Community Safety Hubs, which is being able to get that information share and problem solving with all the partners, and being able to deal with those emerging rural crime, rural issues together, not just in silos. From a Rural Task Force perspective, PCSOs follow up on rural crime visits, give bespoke crime prevention advice. We've previously run an offer under Operation Woolen to every farm in North Yorkshire, offering bespoke crime prevention advice. And obviously that's developed on into the really successful Safer Streets project 1 and what will be 2 in the rural wards around Selby. Which the Rural Task Force, the Safer Neighbourhood teams, and obviously the OPFCC have been highly involved and supported over recent years. The anecdotal stuff, but what I found was fantastic is I sampled it, checked it myself. It was prior to the pandemic, however, but if I went to the local auction mart and spoke to the first 3 people that walked through out the doors at the end of the auction mart, every single one of them could give you the Rural Task Force officer's name of who's covering their area, which I thought was unique in policing, that we have got that almost local Bobby feel in some areas of North Yorkshire, that they know who their officer is, which I thought was very comforting news, and we wish to continue. We've also got to acknowledge that that we have got these what we feel is good standing relationships with our rural communities, but there is we do acknowledge the research out there from the previous National Rural Crime Network surveys, where not only in North Yorkshire but across the country, that there is an underreporting of rural crime, and there is some lack of confidence in the police in relation to rural issues, and it is our desire, obviously, to continue in trying to build those long-standing relationships, listen to them and address the concerns. The next strength that I'd like to pick up on is in relation to the Rural Watch scheme that over the last couple of years has developed and is now on the WhatsApp platform. It's grown dramatically over recent years, and we see as a huge success of the public and the police and partners working together. So we've now got 25 active watch groups with over 2,000 members across North Yorkshire, which is just fantastic. They're those individuals, some of them engage in the border watch and rural watch operations, and the amount of information that's being passed locally, vehicle registration, suspect vehicles that we're picking up on, is fantastic and leading to some great intelligence and great opportunities to catching people in the act. The community-led with local policing contacts. Some are stronger than others, granted, but we do see this is as a good step forward, but also I do feel there's an opportunity to review the effectiveness of that approach and see if there are any other opportunities to enhance how that's run. So we will be looking at that also. The final strength that I'd like to discuss is around a new working model and leadership for the Rural Task Force. So from superintendent, myself, chief inspector level, inspector and sergeant, all are new members of the team, or relatively new members of the team over this year. We've got a new energy and drive of where we want to take the Rural Task Force, and we have the support of our Chief Officer team in a new operating model, which I'll describe later in the presentation. We've got at the helm as such Inspector Clive Turner, who's got and Sergeant Mark Earnshaw, who are very experienced officers who have got a track record of leading very proactive teams, hence their appointments in this key role. And I'm just good. Sorry, I'll just move that. Move on to the next slide. I just want to talk about where we also, as North Yorkshire, one of the great strengths that we've got is around our footing at national level. So we've previously been the MPCC leads for wildlife crime and rural affairs. That moved to Cheshire and is now recently arrived with Northumbria Police with DCC Debbie Ford. We've obviously got the experience of that's in the Office of the Police and Fire Chief, with the experience of Julia Mulligan being previous chair of the NRCN. So we've got some experience in your office, Commissioner, that can assist us with this. But currently in North Yorkshire, we've seconded our previous Rural Task Force Sergeant, Inspector Kev Kelly, who is currently the head of the National Wildlife Crime Unit based in Stirling, and he's the National Silver now for wildlife crime. The National Silver and Lead for Rural Crimes is our very own Superintendent Steve Thomas from County Command. Recently appointed as the new NPCC Poaching PD Priority Delivery Group Chair is Inspector Amy Hunter. And then there's myself, who worked and supported to previous Chief Constable Dave Jones for a number of years on the MPCC Wildlife Crime and Rural Affairs portfolio. The diagram on the right hand side there is a list of the identified current priorities for rural crime nationally, and sitting in the middle there is poaching of all types, but the main one that affects North Yorkshire is in fact poaching, and particularly hare coursing. Up on the slide at the moment, just to give you an understanding, it's the figures there are over a 14-month period. The 1351 number is a 12 months. It should be a couple of paces along, but the total number for over the 14th month period is 1,435 incidents. This is our number one rural crime issue in North Yorkshire when looking at the demand data. You can see from that data that the poaching season starts around the August-September area and normally tails off during the March area. this is more about what's been reported, but the truth of it is that there's probably a lot more out there that isn't being reported. But we now have this, because we've been recording this since the start of the Rural Task Force. We haven't got the data going back to November 2016. The impact on poaching, not only from a wildlife crime perspective, but for the rural communities, can't be underestimated. The threats of violence, intimidation, damage to crops, gates, and the impact of that can be absolutely shocking to the public. And we need to put that effective response in place. We do have a proposal that we have a new approach to poaching in North Yorkshire, which I'll discuss later in the presentation. But when we're comparing against other counties, ourselves, we do have, and it all comes down to geography and environment. The flatter areas in our county, in Hambleton and Richmondshire, will see more poaching incidents. But when we compare our stats to, say, Lincolnshire, which is a very flat county, their numbers are quite dramatically bigger than ours when compared with almost 80 to 90% larger in volume. And these criminals are prepared to travel very long distances, sometimes across the entire country, in it to pursue what they see as a hobby or as a pursuit. They over the last 365 days, 29 people have been reported for poaching offences and are pending court. We, through the new approach that I'll discuss in the presentation, we're looking to increase that. We also have some other approaches with the use of criminal protection warnings and notices, ultimately to get some better sentencing, better than the current legislation can provide. One of the other indicators available to us is insurance claim data. A huge chunk of the farming community use the NFU Mutual as their insurers. North Yorkshire Police, this report comes out, this rural crime report comes out by NFU Mutual every year. And North Yorkshire appear on the top 10 worst affected counties on an annual basis. But what we are seeing is in that comparison between 2019 and 2020 is a significant drop in the amount of claims that have done. So we've moved from that 2.2 million claims in 2019 to 1.2 in 2020, which is a 41.6% decrease. We'll see what the impact of the pandemic in next year's rural crime report and understand it further there. There are some promising signs of dramatic reductions in claim data when compared with some of our neighbouring forces and other like rural forces across the country. From a challenger's perspective, tackling cross-border criminality is not only from a rural perspective, but across the board is a real challenge for us at North Yorkshire Police. North Yorkshire is an attractive place for criminals to operate because of the large geography, more affluent communities compared to some of our surrounding bordering forces, and with the A1 motorways running through north to south, it's easily accessible for those criminals prepared to travel long distances and across board. So it's important that that we put that policing response and have those proactive operations at our borders and utilise ANPR technology in order to target that travelling criminality. I also talked earlier about environment, particularly from a rural perspective. The environment of flatlands, particularly in the Hambleton into the Richmondshire area, gives us the perfect conditions for hare coursing during certain parts of the year. But also we have some border challenges, particularly in the south of the area in the Craven district, where we see more plant and quad bike thefts from our farmers being targeted. So working closely with those farms around target hardening, crime prevention advice, working with the rural watchers, and being able to get into those areas before what the not common trend is criminals from the south of us travelling over the border quickly, committing crimes and then getting back over the border. The second challenge that we face is something we've touched on a lot already, which is this poaching and particularly hare coursing issues. And again, I won't repeat myself, but it's along the line. I want us to just go through the points of that, not underestimating the impact that has on our rural communities, men with dogs on land, causing damage and intimidation. So that's why it is a particular focus of our approach moving forward. Intelligence sharing between forces, it's not just rural crime. This is across the board. There are some significant challenges of sharing intelligence with between forces. What we are seeing is an uptake of, and we are hosting a number of our forces, neighbouring forces, with our rural task force, who are either have developed a dedicated rural crime team, or are looking at that idea. We particularly over the last 6 months have developed a very strong relationship with our Humberside colleagues on the rural crime side of things, and are now conducting joint operations along that border. And that is really helping with that travelling criminality between on that side of the county. We'll of course continue to look at every opportunity. One of the things that has dropped off during the COVID period is regional groups meeting to discuss prevention and enforcement opportunities, joint intelligence working, and the new Rural Task Force Inspector has taken responsibility to put some life back into that group and make sure that we're working as closely as we can be. So we're not displacing criminality into other counties, that we're effectively dealing with this as a region and wider. The last challenge that we've got is around protecting our wildlife. Talked about poaching already. I'd like to talk about raptor persecution. North Yorkshire is a very, very attractive place for our birds, the national birds and international birds of prey, to visit, because of the environment. It's and the grouse moors. There is a long history of persecution of our raptors in North Yorkshire, and were highlighted through the years as one of the worst areas in England for raptor persecution, the shooting, trapping or poisoning of birds of prey. That resulted in, a couple of years ago, the creation of Operation Owl, which was a North Yorkshire Police operation, raising awareness and working with our with a number of rural partners and bodies and individuals to try and raise awareness and encourage intelligence sharing. That operation now has been adopted nationally, and is again through North Yorkshire Chief Inspector Kev Kelly, who created OPOWL, is now adopting that nationally. What we have done is through our own Superintendent Norton has released £6,000 worth of funding for a specific drive, Crime Stoppers drive on intelligence relating to raptor persecution and hare coursing, and that's going to be rolled out in the coming months. Solving raptor persecution crime is very, very difficult indeed. They happen in very remote isolated locations, and we do require the assistance of the public in relation to any intelligence. So we're hoping that this particular investment in an enhanced Crime Stoppers campaign will result in some good intelligence that we can act on, not only on raptor persecution but on poaching. One of the areas that was asked that we cover is to understand the impact that COVID-19 has had on our rural communities. I've discussed this with a number of our policing partners, and the feedback is that largely the effect is very similar to the urban areas, with some unique experiences, and there's the obvious isolation that a number of us, both in urban and rural locations, have experienced. But through that pandemic journey of lockdowns and things like that, we have to acknowledge that there was a feeling in some of our rural areas of intimidation and frustration with the influx of visitors during restrictions, whether that is a lot of people when they could get out of the house, have gone and visited beautiful North Yorkshire and gone to all the fantastic places to walk, and those that large groups of cyclists out enjoying the 5,000 miles of roads available to them through North Yorkshire. A very challenging time, and obviously new ground for all of us. But yes, there was that intimidation, frustration. Obviously, the policing response there was to engage and explain to those visiting us what was reasonable, but through that period of time. Obviously, in our rural locations, we've got that ageing population, and access to services is certainly challenging for our communities. And with the financial impact of COVID, we're seeing firsthand that some businesses haven't survived or are struggling with the new world, and when they're reopening and rebuilding their businesses. So there's some of the themes and understanding the impact that that COVID-19 has had on our rural communities. So opportunities. Opportunities. What we have here, the first one is a wider specialist operations response to support rural issues. It's something that we, as a new management team in the specialist operations, we have a number of departments, from our firearms support units, operational support units, road policing group. We've got a number of different departments that have specialist skills that can pursue criminals that fail to stop. And as a directorate, we've identified that rural crime will be one of our priorities. That we will support the rural task force with a number of different departments for proactive operations, and to be in our rural communities when their specialism isn't required for dynamic and critical incidents that are ongoing in the force at the time. So there's a new approach to support the rural task force. There are 7 PCs and 7 PCSOs on the rural task force, and they need support from not only from our safer neighbourhoods, who the teams that they work closely with, but also from the wider Spec Ops. And as a leadership team, we'll be driving that through our daily management meetings when we're conducting our rural crime operations. The second opportunity we have is a new approach to our hare coursing and poaching, and I just want to talk through that now. Op Galileo is the national approach to tackling hare coursing and poaching. So We attend national conferences and take part in the increased coordination of this issue. There are in the making at national level at the moment are those proposed changes to legislation and introduction of potential new powers that will make tackling this particular crime more effective. At the moment, we are having to take a different approach and use antisocial behaviour legislation in order to what we feel is tackle this appropriate because of that gap that we feel is not helping. The legislation is not helping our response to this particular crime type. We're gathering information, we're gathering intelligence and data capture to understand the problem more and more and sharing that nationally. There's also the issue of seized dogs, and we are looking at and introducing a new approach to that. But what we have in support of Op Galileo is a local approach, which is Op Figaro, and that is identifying who of those participating in hare coursing and poaching are our high harm offenders, identifying and disrupting their activities, and having specific actions against those individuals. We're taking a fair ways approach, and I've talked about this earlier about using antisocial behaviour legislation to be able to tackle and displace offenders. So what we're looking at is starting at the crime prevention warning. So those that meet the criteria will be issued with warnings. We've had 30 so far. If their activity continues, then they would move to crime prevention notices. So one of those is actually moved to that official level, and then the next step from that, if their activities continue, is to pursue a criminal behaviour order against the individual, which allows us to get more restraint and offences and convictions against the individuals. So that's the new approach. We've also looking from a new model around dealing with dogs. The dogs that they use in the commission of this crime, we often have the opportunity to seize those dogs. It's very costly to keep them in kennels. However, we do have some funding for that through NYP. We've also got access to national funding. If the individual concerned is a top national target, the National Wildlife Crime Unit will pay a certain amount of money to pay for the kennelling of those dogs. But we're also monitoring and doing some legal inquiries in relation to potential fostering of dogs as another alternative to this disruption technique, which also could be an evidential opportunity of seizing the dogs. So that will be until we have any legislation change. That will be our approach moving forward in relation to tackling hare coursing. So proactive operations, wider training for the wider organisation to understand what they need to do, and the Rural Task Force under a new operating model will take responsibility for all poaching and hare coursing investigations moving forward to provide that expertise to that particular crime type, which is our #1 issue. So building on existing an opportunity to build on existing developing relationships with our border enforcers. I touched on it. Great opportunities recently to build on our relationship with Humberside. The same is developing with Lancashire, and we've got good strong links north in Cleveland and Durham. We've also obviously got the national NPCC lead for rural affairs in Northumbria now, which are part of our regional group. So we're hoping to see some momentum come through that group as well, and have these joint operations, better intelligence sharing and joint training opportunities. And like I said, rather than displacing these high harm offenders, is dealing with them effectively as a region. Finally, we need to take opportunity of the public and utilise those living and visiting North Yorkshire to tackle rural and wildlife crime. They're our eyes and ears, and we need the community to come forward with intelligence, know the signs of rural crime, know what for example, raptor persecution, if that what a trap looks like, a pole trap or anything like that, that they know how to feed that into to us. And of course, we're like I've mentioned previously, we've got the opportunity and invested in some enhanced Crime Stoppers campaign on rural and wildlife crimes. So our aims moving forward is to launch the new operating model for the Rural Task Force. So it's our intention on the 29th of November this year to launch this new operating model. The key focus will be, like I've said before, targeting high harm rural and wildlife offenders, identifying top targets, and not just the Rural Task Force, but the wider Spec Ops departments to take action against those individuals, execute warrants, disruption, but identify and have ownership of those and work closely with our local command areas in relation to those. And with the resources that we have in Inspector, 2 sergeants and 7 PCs and 7 PCSOs spread across a huge geography. I'll just pop up on the screen there the coverage we're talking about there. As you can appreciate, we have to, as the Rural Task Force, is an enhancement on local policing, and is what can these group of officers do to enhance that. And we feel that targeting those key offenders causing the most harm with the support of our Spec Ops colleagues, that will be able to make a difference to those causing the most harm. We'll continue with the fantastic work done by the PCSOs around early intervention, target hardening, crime prevention advice with our farming community, and also those follow-up visits with those that have been victim of crime that the PCSOs do. And there's a slide that I'll talk about at the end of this particular aims bit around a partnership approach, but just taking advantage of some of the partnership relationships that might have faded as such during COVID, is that as we rebuild, is start to rebuild those relationships, but make them stronger than they have been in the past. And we have, I believe, the leadership team to be able to take that forward. What the other changes that will be in this new operating model will be the introduction of a 7-day-a-week tactical advice model. These officers can't be across that huge geography dealing with every rural crime. It's not possible. But what they can be, they can do, is the unique nature of some rural and wildlife crimes is if they can't attend and deal in person, then they will be provided through the force control room a rural task force officer to contact. It will also be a reactive and proactive approach. That reactive in calls coming in and past the name and colour number of an officer, but also in a proactive approach that they will continue to review all rural crimes that are happening in their area, understanding where, putting those jobs together that are happening across, understanding patterns, and linking in with the local command, DMMs and our own Spec Ops DMMs to put an effective response to emerging rural crime issues. We're increasing the number of proactive rural and wildlife crime operations by that closer links to the Spec Ops other departments. We will there'll be work further on enhancing and reviewing what the rural watchers can be involved in relation to that, which we hope that they can support in every way they can be, to be our eyes and ears out in the communities. And then I've mentioned the closer integration with our local command areas to make sure that they understand how the Rural Task Force is supporting the local commands and how they can help with that, with understanding the picture locally. Also through Safer Streets 1 project led by the OPFCC, we've managed to get some fantastic kit with night vision goggles, which been able to go out across the Spec Ops Department and Rural Task Force, which have already resulted in when quad bike thieves were disturbed in the Craven area, they've been able to deploy quickly. Rural Task Force have used that technology and found 2 offenders who had gone to ground in a dark location and be able to get them arrested for the offences that were committed, and also utilise some of the NPR investment that's gone through those Safer Streets projects. So really looking forward to the 29th of November and this new approach where we have the support of the local commands at the moment, and they're pleased to have a closer links between the Rural Task Force and the commands. We've moved on already. We've moved to discuss the second point, which is the new approach to tackling poaching and hare coursing. So I won't go over that again. But the developing intelligence picture is something that we are trying to do through the Crime Stoppers campaigns, and also working closely with the neighbouring forces and encouraging the public through PAM and any other means through our corporate comms department to share, to get the public sharing information, registrations of suspect vehicles, and how to notify it through the FCR or through our online reporting. But build that intelligence picture. That's what we as police need, is as much intelligence as possible that will help us get ahead. And the final one is in relation to building a new partnership approach for North Yorkshire. Just pop that up there. This is a proposal in relation to we do some good partnership working with various partners across our county, but there isn't the forum or the network to be able to pull all this together and have a group or forum to be able to effectively deal with this. There are some examples across the country where this has worked really well, particularly in Police Scotland, where they have this network of across Scotland on rural crime matters. I've just put there to an example, and again, this is at idea stage and something for us to discuss further. But I do feel that there is an opportunity to improve how our partners work together in order to protect our rural communities. That's through prevention, intelligence, enforcement, and reassurance. I've put an example at the bottom there of some of the membership that could be involved if approached. But you know, we've got some fantastic existing relationships with our national parks, and particularly with RSPCA in North Yorkshire, and we have joint operations, but there isn't that existing forum, that network that's led to be able to pull this all together. It feels like there's lots of work going on individually, but not collectively. So that is something that I'd like to take forward in future discussions. Results moving forward, what we expect to deliver in the next 12 months. From the 29th of November, when the new operating model starts, we'll be tracking through the new benefits monitoring mechanism that's been introduced in North Yorkshire Police, to understand that through that change, understand what benefits that has to the public, to the force, how effective it is with the changes that we've made. With the new approach to tackling poaching, we'll see what our results are in relation to that, how many prosecutions we've got, how many warnings, notices and behaviour orders we've got. And hopefully some legislation over the horizon that will make how we tackle this and getting some meaningful convictions at court home. again, to the results that we're looking for is to having an improved intelligence picture in North Yorkshire and sharing particularly on some of the key issues that we've got around raptor persecution and hare coursing. Also, just to add in there that I've been informed that the new national wildlife crime and rural affairs strategy has been postponed till 2022. I think that will be a great opportunity for us as a force to revisit our own strategy for rural crime, and I'll be working closely with our MPCC colleagues to understand the time frame of when we need to move on there and understand what the national direction is to help develop our local strategy. Yeah, for us to reflect back and look at how stronger and cohesive our partnership relationships are on rural affairs, and hopefully some early successes with a more joined up partnership approach. I'm not sure how long I've been talking, but that's the conclusion. I just want to thank you for the opportunity to talk through some of these issues, particularly that I've been involved in a number of years that I'm quite passionate about and want to make a difference for, and I know my teams do also. But we understand what the demand is in North Yorkshire, and we've got a new operating model that we feel will effectively deal with some of the key issues, supported by our neighbourhood policing teams and wider spec ops. And I do feel support for an enhanced partnership arrangement in North Yorkshire will benefit the public.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief Inspector. I always feel if I haven't got a Butterfield at one of my meetings, it's not a meeting. Very comprehensive, and you actually did it in the precise time allocated, which is impressive. I've got a couple of questions to ask you, and then Tom's got some questions to ask you as well. So 29th of November is the launch. What format is the launch in, and can I attend?
Of course you can. The 29th of November was identified this morning. So and that's around shift pattern changes that were required and notice to ensure that we get that 7-day a week model in place to be able to provide that. So our RMU colleagues have been working on that, and this morning confirmed of the 29th of November. So the launch as such, we haven't designed yet, but we'd appreciate your support, very much like the OpSnap launch that we've got coming up on the 1st of November. We'd appreciate your support there, Commissioner. But yeah, it's we've got the date, and now we'll put the design around the launch.
Excellent. Okay, if you if your media folks liaise with ours, that'll probably pull that together quite helpful. Tom, I gather you've been saving up questions to ask.
As you might imagine, Philip, thank you, Alex. That was a really, really helpful presentation, a really great insight into some of the things that you're intending to do there. I've got 6 questions in total, so I'll try and keep them quick. First of all, on a couple of things around hare coursing. Now, there's a lot of evidence around different things about the impact of rural crime, and it's great to see that the cost of crime is coming down, though the caveat to that is obviously that it is based on insurance claims, so there may still be something hidden there. But there's growing evidence around the psychological impact on rural communities, and evidence to show that people are actually moving out of our rural communities because of the fear associated with lamping and hare coursing and the intimidation that often goes alongside rural crime as well. One of the things that crops up in our office a lot, which you'll be very aware of, having helped respond to some of these issues, thank you for that, is first of all issues around the understanding in the force control room around some of these things, and therefore issues in terms of the response and the timeliness of that response and what happens with that response and how that is explained to the people on the end of the phone who are either being intimidated by these people or engaging with them in some way, or are concerned about the trespass that's happening on their land, potentially damaging crops, hurting their economic future. So I know that there is training that's been done, and I just wanted to get an update from you, please, as to what the impact of that has been in the FCR, how many of the FCR have received that OpFiguro training now, and whether you feel that we're seeing an impact from that in terms of improving that response and the timeliness of that response, please.
Yeah, definitely. One of the first challenges for the new Rural Task Force Inspector Clive Turner was this challenge in the force control room around not recognising the impact and the importance of getting an effective response. It's not just chasing a bunny around a field with nobody getting upset or harmed. This is a number one issue for many of our rural public. Clive has been into the force control room, delivered some initial training. What we are seeing is, as we're aware, is the turnover of staff in the force control room is higher than other departments, and what we've put in place is for Clive and others to do a 6-monthly rotation of revisiting this. We're providing further information on the sub-site in relation to poaching and what it is, what it means on the Rural Task Force for them to gain access to. What we also have from the 29th of November is that TACAD service from the force control room. So building in the mechanisms that if a poaching job comes in, that a prompted question is, this is the person you need to contact and consider it in this way. It's a crime ongoing, so in most circumstances, depending on what they are, it could be treated as an immediate grade response required. But I can't give you the exact numbers of who's been trained, but it's something that Clive's through your office have moved on, and that we'll be putting into our practice of having to revisit every couple of months in order to get the message through to the changing staff in the FCR.
That's great, and I can appreciate that as a challenge. I had thought that there was an online training package that was being rolled out to them.
That's for the full for the entire force.
Right.
That's about to go live. But what we want to do is we want to have that hands-on in the FCR, because that's the first point of potential failure. Is revisit that more often to make sure, yes, you've had the package and the officers in the force control room know how to respond to it, but it's that the service recovery issues that have been identified that the Rural Task Force have picked up as a result of, they don't want to return to those days of trying to recover, though. They want to get on and do the job and get the prevention work done, rather than respond to service recovery issues. So as well as the package, which will be rolled out soon, we're adding the new approach to the dog seizures to that, and then it'll be launched force wide. But what I want on top of that is that revisiting FCR, so we get the new members of staff that have come through.
Great, thank you. It would be good if we could get an update outside of the meeting from you about kind of proportions of the FCR that have received that training, and once it is rolled out, if we could get an update as soon as we know that everyone in the FCR has actually undertaken that online package as well. That'd be really helpful then in helping us when we're communicating with communities. Second part of this related to hare coursing then. There's a lot of evidence now to show about the relationship between hare coursing and serious organised crime, especially kind of organised theft, and how often hare coursing can also involve the scoping out of other crimes. I wanted to ask, and it's great that you are now involved in the piece of research that's ongoing through the National Rural Crime Network around this as well. A question about how you go about linking and assessing intelligence around hare coursing and rural crimes, and whether in stopping people around hare coursing you're also considering their involvement in other types of crime. It's generally accepted, I think, that there has been a bit of a failure of the National rural affairs strategy, and not a lot of it has progressed, particularly around regional organised crime units. So as part of this question, I'd also like to ask you, what kind of support are you getting from the ROCU, who are meant to be gathering and processing data and intelligence around all serious organised crime in rural areas, and be grateful to get a bit of input from you on how you feel that support is actually materialising, please.
Yeah, it needs work. You're absolutely right. That link between hare courses and organised criminality is there. We know that that some of them are active members of OCGs, and we're helping in building that development picture when we are stopping and engaging with them. When the new operating model begins, we will be identifying high harm offenders, and that's the opportunity I feel, is that when we move to that operating model where we're looking at disruption and enforcement activity against them, that's the opportunity of having ownership of those individuals, understanding what we're already who locally has got responsibility in NYP, so we're not treading on other criminal investigations, but then linking with the ROCUs as well. So that's that bit about focusing around high harm offenders, but we're not there yet.
Okay, and the ROCU kind of involvement to date?
No, not that I'm aware of. That it's not a daily business thing that the Rural Task Force are engaging with them, or they're engaging with us.
Okay. That's okay. That's maybe something that we need to pick up outside then. Right. Number 3. Sorry, I'll pick up the pace.
Tom, if you can keep it reasonably compact.
Yeah,
otherwise
sure.
We're starting to run over time now.
Does the chief want to come in there?
Thank you. Apologies to interject, but just before we move on, I suppose mindful of the public that are watching the meeting. So just to explain to our audience that ROCU is a regional and organised crime unit. So it's a Yorkshire and the Humber unit that I suppose is the glue in between the National Crime Agency and our local intelligence picture. Is we have that regional organised crime unit that look at the broader picture of organised crime cross-border across the Yorkshire and Humber region, and therefore there are prioritisations. So as opposed to the ROCU just looking at what's a priority for North Yorkshire, they look at serious and organised crime priorities across the region. So there are some high harm target individuals that are crossing our borders that we do gain the benefit of the intelligence work and enforcement work that's taking place in other force areas. So it's just to give the audience that are watching today an understanding of how that picture works, but thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Just a quick one. You talked a bit there about the use of the public as kind of eyes and ears, and very valid, and some great results from that. Converse to that, as you'll also be aware, we've had some concern raised by landowners in the past about abuse that's directed towards gamekeepers in particular, by people who, almost in kind of vigilante way, go out and potentially target them as perceived criminals. So I just wanted to understand a bit about what you're doing to kind of balance that use of the public, and actually work, what you're doing to work with landowners to make sure that side of things is taken into account, please.
Yeah, so part of Operation Oak, one of the great successes of Operation Oak when it first ran was that bringing the landowners and the gamekeepers into the conversation about particularly raptor persecution in that respect. We've had a recent investigation where that again we've taken the opportunity to engage with the gamekeepers of a particular estate where we were looking, and that went down very well, and a good message around trying to challenge it, and but also from a view that that sort of criminality wouldn't be tolerated, was was the view that was given back to us. Yeah, it's this. We're talking about eyes and ears, that we've got an opportunity here with a number of our National Park Gamekeepers Association, Angling Trust. There are a large number of volunteers attached to these individuals, and we did have a good network created a couple of years ago that again we need to put some effort into and life back into, is to utilise the volunteer networks attached to each of these associations to and be able to share products of what we're looking for, what to look out for, and share that to the police through the different mechanisms that's available.
Thanks, and I guess, you know, message out to the public there that kind of abuse of people who are going about their legitimate business won't be tolerated either.
Of course, and you know, the police and response will be whether it's a protest, or whether it's saboteurs, or whether it's just abuse that well, not just abuse, but abuse and threatening behaviour. The police and response will be the same. It'll be assessed by the force control room, and resources will be sent to the scene to assess and engage with those involved.
Thanks. Philip, you'll be glad to know I'm going to skip 2 of my questions and just go for the last one, which is around your new operating model, which does sound really positive. Obviously, previously, the kind of inference is that there was a lot of handover, as we know, to the rural task force around what is seen as rural crimes. In the new model, there's clearly going to be a greater emphasis on neighbourhood policing and response teams owning and local command teams owning those crimes more proactively. You're talking about having that buy-in from command teams, but I guess, and maybe a question for Lisa more than yourself, Alex here, are we confident that our neighbourhood teams and our response teams and the local investigation hubs have the capacity and the resources and capabilities to definitely carry these, you know, very, very sometimes very serious crimes and deal with them in the kind of sensitive and appropriate way that the rural task force would have done in the past, please?
Yeah. So go on, Chief. Sorry.
No, do you want me to answer this?
You can, and I'll add anything if.
Okay, no, thank you, and I'll keep it brief, Commissioner. So we adopt a one-team approach here, and as you've mentioned yourself, Tom, some of these people are the same people that are causing other harm to communities. So we want to move away from that siloed approach. It's about what is the harm in that community, and some of the individuals and the crime and the behaviour that they're involved in is not isolated just to wildlife and rural crime. It's the broader community harm that comes from that. So we're on a journey. We're not there yet. I agree with you. You know, we do need to make sure that all of the departments across the organisation are working together in a holistic approach to tackle this. So it's part of the journey and the new model that Alex has already shared with us, really, that will develop across the organisation. But I shall defer to Alex as the expert to add to that.
No, and the only thing to add there is around getting the right people to deal with the different aspects. So the rural task force and the spec ops team will hunt those high harm offenders down, pick up the investigations, get them to, and if they are a quad bike theft in Craven, for example, that's involved in multiple overlapping OCGs that we've had in the past, that will go to a CID officer that has got the skills and the experience to take on challenging investigations like that. The rural task force officers don't have that experience or expertise, so we need to get that in the right place. But they do have the expertise and knowledge in relation to poaching, so they will retain poaching investigations, not only the ones that they come across with, but will proactively look at the ones that are happening in their areas to make sure we're taking every opportunity to either get one of those protection warnings in place, notices, behavioural orders, or prosecutions. So it's, for me, as well as that is getting the right people people, and it's not just handover and forgotten about. We've got our PCSOs that we're following up and making those contacts with victims of crime and doing that reassurance and visits and crime prevention moving forward. So it's that wraparound support from start to finish.
Okay,
So
fantastic.
one of the things we'll need to do is to bench test some of this stuff, Alex, when it gets up and running, to make sure we're delivering. See, I think it's exciting and what you're doing, and I love the vision you're showing us. But we need to just bench test it down the line, almost like the mystery shopper, to make sure it actually is all working as sold to us. Because you've got a great program there, and I just want it to work for the public, basically.
Absolutely, and what we are doing is all the changes and new operating model are going to be linked to the new benefits monitoring that we've introduced in force, and ensuring that that's tracked, monitored, and that we're able to identify any issues as we go along that journey. Good.
Okay. Well, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your presentation and for your answers. And we're now going to move on to North Yorkshire Police performance update. I think the ACC is going to answer this one.
I will certainly try, Commissioner. So I will load the presentation. And if you can tell me when it's at full screen, that would be excellent.
Yep. And you just need to take it to full size.
It should hopefully be doing that. And let's see if it can try it again. There.
Yeah, perfect. Great.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will go through our performance in North Yorkshire Police for the last month or so. I'll go straight into our 999 data. So obviously our 999 system is our emergency call system, and we have a service level agreement, which is a national agreement to answer 90% of all 999 calls within 10 seconds. Obviously, we only want people to call 999 when it's an emergency, and so when we know people are calling us in an emergency, we want to be able to answer them as quickly as possible. What we see is that we are answering at the moment 53% of our 999 calls within 10 seconds, which is great. However, we have a significant number that we are still not answering within 10 seconds. That's a concern for me, and it's a concern for the force, and we're working and doing everything we can to try and make sure that we get to a place where we are confident that we are answering people as quickly as possible. Now, in reality, for the last 30 days, up to the 7th of September, the average time to answer a 999 call was just under 22 seconds. But as I pointed out, best part of 50% we're getting in under 10 seconds. So what are we doing here? Well, obviously, we are looking at changing our approach to make sure that we really are properly staffed and able to respond effectively. And I think it's fair to say that since we've had that additional funding from yourself, Commissioner, for overtime, our answering calls, when there was some calls that were taking over 2 minutes to answer, that has gone down from 28% last year down to about 0.5, less than 1% of our calls are taking over 2 minutes now, which is good. We are working at a national level to understand why 999 calls are increasing and what we can do to reduce the increase in this county, and also to reduce the abandonment rate in this county as well. Interestingly, we are seeing some trends which are difficult. We are seeing people contacting us when it's inappropriate. And just one example from the last week was when someone had called us on the 9s asking if 1600 hours is the same as 4 p.m. Now that sort of call, it's just not helpful to be calling us on 999. It is an emergency number only. We're also getting interesting situations such as people dropping their phones or dropping their Apple Watches, which automatically contacts the police emergency number as a security measure within modern devices. But that's having an effect, as is our continued increase in having to respond to mental health incidents. But we're doing this national work. We're also looking at longer term recruitment plans so that we are increasing our communications officers to a really high level to make sure that we are really able to staff our ability to answer 999s, and certainly we have got another 12 coming in soon, and they will be on the floor live by hopefully in February, and I think it's fair to say in reality over 47% of our calls that we get in the last 6 months on the 999 system, we have answered under five seconds. That's fast. But because we know that when people call 999, by and large, it's when they really need our help, we are working quite tirelessly to make sure that we improve on this figure.
Okay, so sorry, go on, Mark.
Well, I was going to go on to the 101 next.
Can we just talk through 999? I'm conscious members of the public will be picking this up. So obviously you are picking the calls up and you're picking up over half within the time limit that we want. The problem is we've got some that aren't. We've agreed this morning that in terms of resources, we will make you available in terms of whatever's necessary to do it. We've also asked in terms of beefing up recruitment, and we've also said in terms of modelling on calls on 999 and 101, we will basically look at modelling software to see basically what's happening, so we can actually predict shifts. And I'd just like to reassure the public that there is a group meeting on a weekly basis looking at this, and I'm also having a weekly report, and and that's the North Yorkshire Police and the OPFCC, will do whatever is necessary to get this right, and it is a top priority. Sorry, you can continue now, Mark, but I just want to make it clear that everybody's on the same page, but there is some pain to get this right, and we have to get it right.
You're absolutely right, Commissioner, and I think the challenge is, first of all, we identify there's a problem, then we work out how we're going to resolve it, and like you say, everyone is on the same page to try and deal with this and address it. And that also applies to the 101 numbers as well. So the 101 obviously is the standard calls. We typically get 2 101s for every 999 call that we receive, and although it says on this page that 65% of all received calls are either 999 and 101, you might wonder what the other calls are that we get. 7,000 go into the front counter. We get calls from the different emergency services as well, about 1,500 a month, and quite a few callback calls are coming in as well. So that is what basically makes up, as well as some internal demand as well for the police service, which we're really trying to limit. But what we see here is that our service level agreement, which is very different to the 999. So 999 calls 10 seconds. Service level agreement for the 101s is significantly longer than that. Which is actually now 2 minutes. It used to be 1 minute, it's 2 minutes now. We're still not hitting that service level agreement to anywhere where we would expect to. The reasons for this, in reality, at the moment, we are seeing a situation where COVID sickness is having an effect. So we have got reduced numbers in our command centre, in our force control room, which is causing us problems. We're seeing that in the last 30 days, the average time was 3 minutes and 45 seconds. That's not really where we want to be at all. So we are working to work out, like you say, with new technology, new software, training and increased staffing, supported very much by the overtime that you're providing us with at the moment. We are looking to really be able to reduce these times down to some a better place. Interestingly, in the last 30 days, just up to the 21st of September, we're at 48%, which is obviously better than that 37%, but it's still not where we want to be. Our abandonment rate is inevitably going to be higher when people are waiting longer on the phone. But certainly through the use of callback and other mechanisms, we're wanting to address that so that we can really make sure we're not losing information that the public want to give us. So,
sorry, go on.
No, Commissioner, if you want to comment on the 101 stuff.
No, so I think the key thing on 101, obviously we've agreed in terms of modelling software and also in terms of whether we can publicise call waiting. There's a business case that you're putting together, and we're going to have a special meeting to discuss that next month to drive things through. And again, I just want to reassure the public that we're very much on the case with this. And as I remind the police, this is the shop window. and we have to have this right, that people can get through to the police promptly, and the more information we can make available to people about good times to phone, about the kind of calls we would expect and the kind of calls you don't expect. I think there's a piece of work to be done around that as well, because there are quite a lot of frivolous calls that come through on this, because it's a number that's staffed 24/7, and if people can't get hold of the local authority, they'll happily phone the police on 101 to tell them stuff that's often local authority things, and noise abatement comes immediately to mind, but there's lots of other cases, and not least people phoning sometimes with mental health issues as well. Right, sorry, you can continue now, Mark.
No, not at all. And I absolutely support and agree with all of those comments. So just moving off from the specific 9s and 1 numbers, actually look at the type of calls that are coming in. So there's two charts there which show a fairly static level of calls, and this is for our immediate grades and our priority grades. So obviously if we're responding to something that needs an immediate police response, that's an immediate grade. If it's of a slightly lesser urgency, we don't have an offender specifically at the scene who needs to be arrested, or a person who immediately needs to be kept safe, then that would be a priority, a P grade response. And what this shows is that really over the last 90 days we've had about 87 immediate grade responses that we have to provide a response to basically save life, typically, or to apprehend an offender where a crime is in progress. That stays fairly static at about 87 incidents, and our P grades, we're about 91 incidents a day, so we're fairly consistent between immediate grade response and our priority grade responses, both of course which have to be appropriately triaged and assessed when they come in, so we can make sure that we send the right resource and the right type of policing response to that. That chart also just shows how we divide them, just very simplistically, between antisocial behaviour, crime, and public safety and welfare. And what that shows is that for crime type offences, which we get less crimes than we get public safety, we need to provide more police officer response to that, because typically there'll be different types of policing required. And the average officers therefore is slightly higher, and that's both for immediate and for priority incidents. But it's staying fairly consistent in that response that we're providing. So if we move on to general crime and crime figures, what we're seeing is a really interesting situation where we're looking at crime trends. And when we are looking at crime trends, we have to consider that what's happening nationally, but also make sure that we're really responding to what's happening locally. And what we see when we're looking at 3-year data, 12-month data, and 90-day data is that violence in this county is increasing, in as much as our violence that we're dealing is now 39%, best part of 40% of all incidents that the police deal with are different types of violence. That doesn't mean it's always going to be people who are seriously injured. There's various different categories within violence against a person, but we're seeing that where people are being affected, physically hurt in some way, being sexual offences or standard or nighttime economy, drink-related punch-ups, that sort of thing. Violence is the one that we are having to prioritise, rightly so, because it is where we are increasing in crime type, as in volume. We're also seeing that a lot of other crime types are reducing, and certainly it's interesting to see that, the 3-year average for theft was 18%. We're down between 15 and 16% now, and lots of other things. For instance, burglary significantly reduced, about half of where it was 3 years ago. Vehicle offences have gone down, and others are significantly lower as well. So we do have to provide a policing response proportionate to what we have to deal with, and we have to be agile and flexible with regards to that. And so we on a monthly basis really scrutinise our crime types, really scrutinise where our crime is going, to make sure that we are providing the correct and the best response to the people of North Yorkshire. We know that obviously COVID has had a profound effect on crime trends, and that's something that we need to make sure that we are dealing with appropriately. So what we see here is the different types of crime we had compared to say 2 years ago to now, and we're seeing different types of crime having different effects, and where we're looking, for instance, on our committed crime, when crime was committed, we're seeing crime has gone down in the last year. But when we actually see when crime is recorded, we're seeing that crime has gone up, and that's quite normal because we find out quite often about historic crimes that have happened, and then we start to record those at a later date as soon as we know about them. But sometimes that is after the offence has been committed, and sometimes it's years after the offence has been committed. This information, of course, is all available on the website. And just going into that detail a little bit more, we look at some of the key offences, where the key volume of offences. And, I've talked about violent crime, which you can see has gone up. Those 3 lines are the different lockdowns that we've had.
Mark, could we just ask you about that violent crime?
Sure.
To set you flow, but if you take the 90-day figure that you've got, which is 4531, and
yes,
you multiply that by 4, it takes you to an annual figure of 18,000. Now, I don't know whether that's projecting out, but your average over the past 3 years has been roughly 15,830, and last year was 15,649. So what do you think's driving that violent crime?
I think there's a couple of factors. I
think violence against a person, I should say.
Yes, yeah. I think we're seeing a continued increase in confidence in reporting domestic violence. I think we are seeing victims being prepared to speak to the police and having the confidence to do that. And we would absolutely welcome that. We would absolutely welcome people, if they are being abused, if they are subject to any form of abuse, to notify the police, and we will deal with that sympathetically and in a way that's absolutely right for the victim. But I think as we, with other partners, work to safeguard and support individuals, that is increasing their confidence to come to North Yorkshire Police, and that, of course, is increasing the numbers of violence we have because we're recording them. But I'm more concerned about making sure we're keeping people safe than being worried about this increase in crime. The other thing we're seeing is, obviously, with lockdown stopping and people coming out into the nighttime economy, we are seeing more people on the streets involved in typically low-level disorder, but that is recorded as violence, and quite often it's because it's punch-ups and everything else. We hadn't seen the alcohol-related abuse and the alcohol-related criminality, obviously, during the lockdown period that we are seeing now. And so where we see that sharp rise at the top of the screen there, that is quite significantly related to the nighttime economy, as well as the domestic violence that we are proactively trying to encourage people to report.
Okay.
So if we now move on to, okay, so we know where the crime is happening. We know the type of crime that's happening. We now want to look at whether the police are dealing with crime appropriately. We have a complex picture as to how we deal with crime, and we report accordingly to make sure that we are accurately recording what's happening to everyone. Now, what we have is a position where what we call a positive outcome, which is anyone who's charged or cautioned or warned, or if there is a community disposal or restorative disposal, then what we do is we record that, and we're at about 16% to have a positive outcome. Now, you might think that 16% is actually a very low figure for all crime, that we're only getting a positive outcome in 16%. But in reality, there are many reasons why we're not able to get a successful disposal at the end of someone's journey in reporting and being involved in a crime. 26% are because victims don't want to support a prosecution. And although we will not always do solely what the victim wants, because we will sometimes have victimless prosecutions, evidence-based prosecutions, we also have situations where we don't find people, and that's closed investigations, about 27%. Sometimes there's good prosecution reasons, and the CPS will make a decision not to progress with a prosecution because the evidential test isn't met, or it's not necessarily in the public interest, or because we are still processing those cases, and we may subsequently get to a prosecution at a later stage. And of course, the longer time goes on, the higher the resolution, the positive outcome comes, and less on a waiting prosecution. What I'd like to provide reassurance both to yourself, Commissioner, and to the public, however, is if you compare the most recent data nationally collated between us in North Yorkshire and our most similar areas, and those are areas with similar demographics, for instance, Norfolk, Suffolk, North Wales, Lincolnshire, Devon, West Mercia and Gloucestershire, we are in the last 30 days absolutely at the top of the tree, in as much as our positive prosecution rate is higher than our most similar forces, which I think is to be recognised of the work that's done by our criminal justice department and everyone involved in those prosecutions. Also, if we look at the most recent data with regards to our similar forces, our other forces in the Yorkshire and the Humber area, again, we're in a really, really positive place with regards to our outcomes. And certainly we are well above average nationally with regards to our positive outcome rate, which is great. Having said that, our outcome rate is something I'm very focused on to make sure that we absolutely maximise every opportunity to make sure that we get victims the right outcome in court or before court if appropriate.
Okay, I think Tom's got a question for us.
Yeah, it was two questions. Mark, you've answered one of those there. It was going to be to ask, well, actually, though, what is the national resolved rate at the moment, if you have it in front of you, potentially, just so we can have that comparison.
Okay, so the comparison in Yorkshire and the Humber is for the last month 13.8%, and we were at 20% in the last last month.
30 days, yeah.
And the most similar force average was 13.7%, and we were at 20%. Like I said, for the last month. National average, England and Wales is 12%, Yorkshire and the Humber is 13.8%, most similar group is 13.7%, and we're at 20% for the last 30 days.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had,
ACC. Sorry, go on, Tom.
the other question I had was around the cases awaiting outcome, because obviously we did at one point have a real issue around crime data integrity and all of that, and there are I remember the colours of the charts that we had at that point, and it seems that this chart is starting to replicate potentially some of the same kind of trends in terms of expanding the light blue bars at the top. So just wanted to get some assurance. I know DCC Kane is leading on this, but just get some assurance that we're content with our kind of cases that are still awaiting outcome rate at the moment, please.
I'm never content, Tom.
Right.
In reality, we need to absolutely work with all of our criminal justice partners to make sure that we get as speedy justice as possible without it being inappropriate, and making sure that we've got the appropriate disposal for every crime that is committed, and that we bring offenders to justice. But the challenge is to make sure that we don't just go down one avenue. We look at all of the disposal options available, and some of these may be out of court disposals, some of them might be cautions or restorative support, but we absolutely need to make sure that we get cases resolved as quickly as possible. And this is something that we really, really spend a lot of time looking at how we can improve this with our partners and the criminal justice partnership.
Thank you, Mark. Sorry, just to clarify
one
element then. We had a real problem with our backlog in the crime management unit at one stage. And I just want to make sure that we are content that, as you say, some of this awaiting outcome is more around investigation, ongoing investigation, or relationships with criminal justice partners, and that we're not seeing that build up of a backlog in the crime management unit.
The backlog we have is completely normal at the moment. Okay. I'm comfortable that we are not in the place that we were previously, but it's just a case of making sure that we keep on top of that to make sure that victims are supported as best as possible.
Thank you very much.
Which I suppose brings me nicely on to the victim journey. and making sure that the victim code is being supported by us. I think it's fair to say that nationally, we're a bit frustrated to make because we are still trying to understand from the Ministry of Justice how the victims code is to be managed and monitored. But what we do in North Yorkshire at the moment, whilst pending the guidance from the Ministry of Justice, is that we're doing a lot of data sampling to make sure that victims are being treated appropriately within North Yorkshire, making sure that we can understand by some technology we're putting in place to understand that victim journey, understand victim updates, so that if we are in a place where we don't think victims are being supported appropriately, we can put sanctions, put interventions in place to make sure that we are supporting victims, and to make sure that we're providing the appropriate support to police officers so they know what victims should expect. To make sure we support victims. And it is now almost a cliche and people will hear it all the time, but victims absolutely have to be at the heart of all criminal justice processes, to make sure we are providing them with what they require to ensure that they are not victimized again, and that they're satisfied with the criminal justice process, of which obviously the police are very much part of that. So this is still work in progress, but we're putting a lot of energy into this, and we're very much part of the national working groups to ensure that we are supporting victims as much as possible.
How many officers have been trained in terms of this, in terms of engagement with victims, and how many still need to be trained, Mark?
Specific numbers on victim training, the victim training package we've got, all officers have got to take. All operational police officers have had a booklet on what victims are to expect from them, and every police officer's actions with regards to victims are monitored and managed through by their supervisors with all live crimes. But when the Ministry of Justice tell us exactly what else they want from us, there will be additional training coming in to make sure that we get it right in North Yorkshire.
Okay, so I'd like you to give me a commitment that when we do get that direction, that officers do get that training, and
Absolutely.
There's some testing of them. It's the one criticism we have, that you actually do a really good job in many cases solving crimes, and the victims are not always informed what's happened, and the victims are left sometimes in a level of uncertainty in terms of actually what's happened, and you've actually solved it and you've dealt with it, but then you don't tell them the good news, and we lose stakeholders who we should have on side simply because we haven't told them that you've done the magic.
I know, and it is frustrating, Commissioner. That's exactly the case, and we need to work on how we make sure victims are at the centre of everything we do, and like you say, letting ourselves down and letting the victim down at the very last moment when we've actually got a defendant arrested, we've had him sentenced, and he's sitting in jail. The victim should absolutely be knowing about that.
Excellent, because I'm going to keep reminding you of that every time we have these meetings to make sure we have good progress. Thank you.
Sure,
you can go on now.
Thank you. Okay, stop search, some basic detail here, just to make you aware that if we get stop search issues wrong in this county, it really does adversely affect our legitimacy in the eyes of the public. So within the last year that's been assessed, we've searched 2,750 specific individuals. You can see the breakdown there. The majority, 82% of the stop searches are men. And when we're looking at why we're searching people, typically it's for drugs or for stolen goods, and then subsequently after that for bladed articles or articles in theft. But certainly we have a priority around knife crime, so we need to keep pushing, and we push this on a monthly basis and analyze the data around how many people we are stopping specifically for knives and how we're targeting individuals. But likewise, issues around drugs, making sure we're targeting people appropriately to prevent the misuse of substances in North Yorkshire is something that we're really still keen on doing. You will see the data there. We have about a 10% positive outcome and a 10% arrest rate for people we stop search. We have a specific panel that looks at stop search and whether we're stop searching people appropriately, and we're in a position now where we're able to require every single officer to wear body-worn video when they do a stop search, so that if complaints are made, we can really analyse to see if that stop search is appropriate. And even if they're not, if we don't have complaints, we need to be scrutinising to make sure that this interaction with the public, which is very contentious nationally, as we know, is being done appropriately, proportionately and lawfully. And that we are not discriminating against any one group in society, which I'm really comfortable at the moment in North Yorkshire is absolutely not the case. If I can move, I'm just bearing in mind the time. If we can move on to workforce, unless there was any questions specifically on stop search.
No, but I have questions on workforce.
Okay, I'm sure you do. Okay, so our police officer numbers, we know what our target is that we're aspiring to, and we will get to that number. We're actually slightly below the number at the moment with 1,510 actual police officers. There's a whole work plan in place to make sure that we are recruiting appropriately, and we are looking at some quite radical recruiting and aggressive recruiting to make sure that we get to the numbers that we are able to get to in this county. Also looking at creative approaches such as bringing in recruiters, potentially bringing in returners, potentially looking at other individuals who've got the key skills that North Yorkshire needs to make sure that we are exactly where we need to be with regards to our both our police officers and police staff numbers, so that we can serve the county appropriately. We are going through a whole new approach with regards to student officers, which is a really interesting journey, not just for the student officers, but for the organisation as well, to make sure that we have absolutely the best police officers that we can for the future, and how that works with our current workforce as well, and how we blend it all in. But certainly we are very, very clear what we have to achieve with regards to the workforce and how we need to increase our workforce, and there are plans in place to ensure that recruitment takes place.
Okay, so there's a few things I want to say. First of all, I met some of the student officers yesterday with the Chief Constable, very impressive individuals. If anybody's listening to this live, we have further vacancies within the force. We want you to come and join us and work for us. It's a good job. It's got a very high level of satisfaction. So that's the message today from the Commissioner. However, I am slightly concerned, Mark, that in fact we actually had slightly more officers in August. Your actual officer numbers were 1,514 and our actual officer numbers today are 1,510. I'm conscious that you will tell me it's because of leavers, people who've done their 30 years and left the force, and I understand that. But I think I want to be reassured, despite the paper that I've seen in terms of additional recruitment that DC Kane has actually put together. I just want to be reassured that you will get things back on track in terms of numbers, because we do, we have money through the police uplift. Government is investing and paying for these extra officers, and we are getting there with our recruitment, but it's not happening quite fast enough for me. And I'm conscious the Chief's put a hand up, so she may want to help answer that question.
Well, I will bow to the Chief then.
I thought you...
But it's good news. It's good news, Commissioner, that these are the figures as of the 1st of September. And of course, we attested 28 people yesterday. So the figures as of today are actually 28 more than that. So that's good news. Wow. But not complacent. There is an entire plan. We had a very detailed discussion at our Chief Officer team meeting yesterday that obviously we will share with you in the uplift updates that you receive, about just spreading some of those opportunities and not putting all of our eggs in one basket. So we need a mixed solution to this, of student officers, retention of people with skills, potential rejoiners, transferees, which will balance not taking in either all brand new people that we know require a lot of investment and training, which is great, but they don't land on the streets as quickly as those that transfer in, or maybe retaining those that have got the skills. And so I share your concern, and therefore there is a tight focus on us continuing that drive to make sure that we keep those numbers moving in above the numbers that are leaving us.
So can I add the 29 to the 1510? Is
Yes.
it as simple as that? So that actually gives me 1,530 officers, I think. Is that right? 39 officers.
As I say, I mean, Commissioner, obviously it changes on a daily basis as people leave, but as you'll have seen in the paper that you've got, we have a projected plan to get us to the correct number by the end of the year. There is confidence that we are doing absolutely everything we can with returners, with transferees, with new recruits to get to that place. A huge amount of work is going for that. But we are very mindful of your concerns and working to address it.
Good, excellent. Okay, but I think we can say that if we have add the 29 in from yesterday, North Yorkshire Police Force is at its biggest probably for about 18, 20 years.
I would say that we are certainly in a significantly better place than we were for the last 10 years. I wouldn't be able to say more than that, but I think you're probably right, yes.
Good, excellent. Okay, we can continue.
So I'll just very quickly finish. And I think that graph on the left just highlights we are not out of the woods yet with regards to COVID. You know, our sickness absences are actually higher now with COVID than they were beforehand. And I think it's a case of, it's a message for everyone really that we still need to be COVID aware. We still need to be working in a safe environment. And we still need to be aware of the impact that the pandemic is having on us. And of course, that has a knock on so many other things that we do within policing. And, you know, and I'll go right back to the start of the presentation and our sickness levels in the control room we are acutely aware of. So it's just to be aware of that. We are actively monitoring our sickness levels. And without doubt, at the moment, coronavirus is the thing that's affecting us most of all, but we are doing lateral flow tests on a very regular basis. We are remaining COVID secure, and we are hoping that will assist with the winter flu season that we're coming into. But obviously, everyone's making sure that they're acting appropriately with that. But Commissioner, if it's okay, I'll leave it there unless there's any further questions.
No, there's no further questions. Thank you for answering the questions, and we look forward to discussing these figures with you next month or beginning of November. Good. That moves us on to North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service, EDI, and I think we have a presentation that is being led by colleagues. Is it the Chief Fire Officer or is it Nikki?
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm just going to let my
I think whoever's speaking, you'll have to speak up a little bit because your microphone's not brilliant.
Can you hear me now, Commissioner?
Just about, Chief Fire Officer.
Okay, sorry about this. My typical bad timing on my microphone. Please say if you can't hear me. So, first of all, thank you for allowing us.
Hang on a second, John. I'm not sure about colleagues. I'm struggling. Can everybody else hear okay?
It's very intermittent, Philip. I think it's fair to say.
You'll either have to shout, John, or hand over to somebody else or change your microphone.
Yeah, I'm going to have to dial out and dial back in again. It's the only way that it's.
Okay. Does Nikki want to say anything while John's coming back in?
I think we were going to open with an introduction from John, and he was going to go through some of the sort of updated statistics. So hopefully we'll be able to hear him when he rejoins.
If not, I'll
hitting him.
Is he coming in? If not, I'll pick up, Commissioner.
Great. Thanks.
Very good, JD.
Okay. Can you now hear me?
That's much better. Thanks,
Thank
John.
you. Okay, so first of all, thanks for allowing us the opportunity to present here today. This subject of culture, diversity, inclusion is something that's really important to me personally, but also as the leader and the chief officer for North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service. Really important subjects, something that we're acutely aware we need to improve on. And today we want to talk through how we aim to do that. I'm really pleased today as well to say that we've got a diverse range of people speaking. So I'd like to introduce that we've got Nikki Wilson, Talent Acquisition Partner within Enable North Yorkshire. Enable North Yorkshire being the collaboration agreement between North Yorkshire Police, North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service, and the Office of the Police Crime and Fire Commissioner. So three-way partnership there. We've also got Rebecca Power, an associate business partner within Enable. We've got Emily May Williams, crew manager, but also a network gender lead for the service. And then also we've got Chris Neal, who is a group manager in the Harrogate and Craven district. So we'll each be talking about certain aspects. Could you move on to the next slide for me, please? Okay, so I just want to now touch really on some of the national and then the local drivers, and just explain a little bit about why this subject is so important to us locally, but also nationally to the wider UK Fire and Rescue Service environment. There are a number of drivers. In 2016, the then Fire Minister of the time talked of a reform which was needed within the Fire and Rescue Service. They talked about three pillars, one being accountability, transparency, the other efficiency and collaboration, and then more wider workforce reform, and that of course includes people. Since then, of course, we've brought in the Her Majesty's Inspectorate, and there are three areas there that are inspected: effectiveness, efficiency, and people. So people is a common strand within all of this, and arguably people are the things that make things happen or not. So really important subject to us. The equality framework that came out, this is something that, again, really important to ourselves. And I'd just like to explain a little bit about what the framework says. It says about equality, some definitions in here. What does equality mean? Well, it's a defined in law within the Equality Act of 2010. So it's something that we've got to consider legally. It's about ensuring individuals and groups of individuals are not treated differently or less favourably on the basis of their specific protected characteristics. And when we talk about diversity, it's about promoting and fostering everybody's right to be different, about being free from discrimination. And then finally, with inclusion, it refers to an individual's experiences within the workplace and in the wider society, the communities which we serve, and to be feeling valued and included. So the equality framework really focuses in on how we as an organisation have our leadership set up accordingly to deal with these issues. We need to know about our community knowledge and engagement, effective service delivery, employment conditions, health and well-being, and recruitment, training and progression. The 5 key areas there the framework talks about. So again, a national driver there that helps us steer the way we deal with things locally. And then more locally, we've got the Fire and Rescue Service plan, and the #1 priority within the plan is about caring for the vulnerable. And it's really, really important that we understand the diversity within our community, so that we can then address the issues that the community face, and that we've got a diverse workforce that can help out dealing with that vulnerability. We have now introduced a people strategy, and the people strategy covers all the enabled partners that I touched on earlier, but specifically within the fire and rescue environment, how we can help tackle some of our diversity issues locally. So we need to, I'll come shortly about talking about how our workforce is structured at the moment. We really need to improve our diversity within our overall workforce. Looking at some of the recent inspections that have taken place, it's really interesting when you see the state of fire report. Not a single service is near having a workforce reflective of the community we serve. And then when we drill that into North Yorkshire, there's a worrying lack of understanding about the benefits of diversity within North Yorkshire, within our workforce. Some staff, middle managers, not seeing the value of a diverse workforce. So we've really got some work to do. When you tie all this together, of course, this is really down to the culture within the organisation and across the UK fire and rescue sector that has got to change, and we are very much committed to doing so. Could we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So looking at our some of our specifics here, just talking about that workforce, it's really, really important that we have a workforce reflective of our community. But when we look there, we have got 94% of our operational workforce men and only 6% women. Now, you know, that's just not good enough. When we've got within North Yorkshire about a 50-50 split of gender, we're way off the mark in terms of where we should be in terms of our workforce profile. Ethnicity, very similar picture. You know, 88% white British. It's nowhere near where we ought to be reflective of the community. The age profile is slightly different. We've got more of a balance across the overall workforce, but nonetheless, there's real work that's got to be done here to drive things forward. And we'll come on shortly to talk a little bit more about how we're aiming to tackle this. Could we move on to the next slide, please? Again, some more stats there covering disability, religion, belief, and sexual orientation. Now, it may be, you know, the public may be thinking, well, how on earth can we have disability within a workforce which is an emergency service, fire and rescue service? But we accommodate disability in various different ways. We make regional adjustments, and we have, you know, we recognise neurodiversity within the workforce as well. So, you know, I'd like to reassure the public that these things should not be barriers to coming forward and joining the organisation. We need to embrace this and make people feel included, and it's certainly areas that we will certainly be working hard to address going forward. I'm now going to hand on.
Sorry, John, can I ask? I have a question for you. Do you want me to save the questions till the end, or ask you them now before you move on?
I'm happy to take questions now. I'm just mindful of time, Commissioner, but I'm happy to take the question now if you have one, yeah.
I think, I mean, first of all, I appreciate your candour, and I think that's very helpful, because if we're not honest, then we can't address the issues. I think one of the alarming stats you've got there is on sexual orientation, 33% of your workforce are not confident stating what their sexual orientation is. That's far too high, and that indicates to me that people are frightened to be who they should be. And I think we need to make sure that as part of the EDI things that we're doing, that people can feel confident about stating who they are.
Absolutely, Commissioner. It goes back to inclusion. People need to be feeling included within the workforce with no threats of discrimination at all. We very much stamp down and challenge on any inappropriate behaviour in that area. But also, I'd like to bring in the wider team now to talk a little bit more about the work we're doing to address these shortfalls, because we do have gender network groups within there to deal with these things and help people feel more included. So I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to hand on to the other team members. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So equality, diversity and inclusion is a key priority for the service. And while a focus is absolutely on increasing and valuing diversity, it's equally as much on workforce inclusion. So the services culture is about value and inclusion, which all comes down to people having the right environment to truly thrive. And there's vast amounts of work integrated into service activity that ensures the service continues to support its people and the communities of North Yorkshire. So the examples I'm going to talk through are only some of the many landscape activities that are currently happening and do include evidence of service progression over the last 18 months. So if I start with the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion group, which is chaired by Jonathan Foster and attended by a varied representation of the workforce, including staff network leads, colleagues in Enable North Yorkshire's talent and diversity team, representative bodies, group station watch managers and firefighter levels also attending. The group meetings are held every other month and are not exclusive to group members. Members of the workforce are actively welcomed and encouraged to attend, to be involved in the discussion topics that are on the agenda and raise things for the service for them to consider. The group coming together is a real opportunity for colleague voice, success to be celebrated, issues to be raised and progress to be monitored and measured throughout the progression of the year. and most importantly for action to be taken. Group members have active participation in driving cultural change in the service and have a diversity of knowledge and experience amongst themselves that are used to support the workforce, signpost or influence service activity. Some of the work that's been completed in service recently includes the delivery of the Intersectionality Conference that was run earlier in this year, a review of service facilities, training on equality, diversity and inclusion through the Leading the Way programmes. There's been a range of positive action campaigns for recruitment initiatives. There's also been an increase in confidence through managers that have been completing equality impact assessments, and Emily's going to talk about that in a little bit more detail once I hand over to her. The workwear projects, regional and national collaboration are some more examples. As well as some of the examples, the service encourages and supports a range of staff networks, as John mentioned. So currently, we have a religion and belief network, an LGBT network, neurodiversity, Black and minority ethnic, women's network, and hopefully in the upcoming future, we're going to be seeing the family network launch in the next 12 months, which is a great development also for the service. There are a range of equality, diversity, inclusion policies and procedures that support an inclusive culture, and these are really embedded through induction or learning and development initiatives, and are used and in place to support people challenging unacceptable behaviour in the service as well. So the service recognises whilst there's some great work that's been undertaken currently, there's absolutely still plenty of work to be done. And recently the group managers and above as heads of functions have created and launched new people plans that really anchor to the drivers that John has talked through in his opening slides, including the people strategy, including the fire and rescue service plan. The people plans that the heads of functions have really focus on how they are going to lead and create the right people inclusive cultures within their areas of the service. And one of the most important things to building the diverse workforce is to listen to really understand and to take action. And the local and corporate objectives that feature within the specific people plans really are going to drive that cultural change. I'll expand a little bit more as we move on to some of the later slides around how these are going to be measured and monitored. But I'll hand over to Emily, and we'll stay on this slide just while Emily talks through some of the work that she's involved in for influencing culture, as well as some of her personal experiences.
Thanks, Becca. So good afternoon, everyone. Emily Williams, crew manager at York currently. I'm just going to take you a little bit through my kind of pathway through the service. So about 8 years ago, I started as a community safety officer for the Prevention and Protection Department. And then I joined the nearest on-call station to where I live. Moving on from that, I transferred into the whole time at Malton. Whilst at Malton as a firefighter, I did a little bit of work in HR doing recruitment with Rebecca. And that was our first whole-time recruitment for 10 years. So there's a lot of work put into the awareness sessions prior and how we were going to run the process. Went back to Malton as a firefighter and then decided to take a temporary post as a crew manager at Direct Trainer. Really enjoyed the year that I had at Training Centre, and then moved out to a crew manager at York. So throughout the time in the service, I've done every shift pattern that the service can provide, and really kind of took the opportunity to work my way around the service the best to gain a good view of everything that goes on. The positive action work that we get involved with as a network, it's really kind of network led driven, because we kind of understand the needs of the females that are thinking of joining the service, and we want to give them the best perspective possible. So some positive action work that we did prior to COVID was some keeping in touch days, where candidates that have been unsuccessful through the recruitment process, we recontacted and invited them to Training Centre and kind of spoke about the barriers that they'd faced. They got a lot of individual feedback, which was really successful. In fact, 50% of the latest on-call whole-time process that we ran, 3 out of the 6 females on that course actually attended the Keeping in Touch session. So that's showing that it's a real success, and the work that we're doing in that area is paying off. We've also run International Women's Day events, and that was a real success for our on-call. So we did an on-call Keeping in Touch Day on International Women's Day, and that was solely run by female firefighters within the service. So it was people from the public coming in and actually kind of experiencing from female firefighters what it's like, taking them through the point of entry test and giving them first-hand experience of what they really enjoy about the job. The other half of that day was we invited our support staff roles prior to Enable to training centre, and then got them to experience what it was like being a firefighter, and they got to wear breathing apparatus, and that was a real success. We opened that up to NYP and Enable as well, and it was really highly attended. Through COVID, we continued to do the positive action work where we could. We actually recorded a full online awareness session, so everyone had the same access to what they would have if it was out of COVID as well, and that was posted online. Other than positive action, we do get involved in as much as possible to support our staff that we've got, and we're currently kind of leading the way for services similar to our size on welfare packs. We've secured the funding, and we're currently rolling the welfare packs out in service, and that will help our female operational firefighters and our female staff actually have a solid work base, so such as community safety officers or control staff, with a pack that is personally issued to them. Some packs will also go on the welfare unit, and our flexi officers will also have them as well in their vehicles, and that's kind of to help with neighbouring services and, you know, protected incidents that might last a little bit longer. So that's a real key proud moment for the network to launch with the welfare packs. The Women's Forum was developed by North Yorkshire through COVID, and that was a small idea that myself and Rebecca had to kind of have an informal chat with other services to find out what they were getting up to, share best practice and learn from other services as well. That kind of grew legs and ran away with itself and became a national forum, which NFCC, the National Fire Chiefs Council, then asked if they could actually develop themselves and badge up as an NFCC network. But we're really proud to host that for the first time and actually develop it. We have a lot of kind of working groups, so obviously it's not just myself as a network lead, we've got the other network leads as well, and we do try not to work in silos, so we try to really connect with each other, and the North York Police networks as well. We try to work as much as possible where we can. We're not just about obviously supporting our staff that we have currently. We've got a real drive at the moment is linking into the community. And finding out, you know, as the community got equal access to the fire service, not just as a 999, but also as job opportunities. So what can we do to kind of give them a better understanding of the actual role of a firefighter and encourage them and share first-hand experience with the communities? So we're doing some great work around that with the LGBT network and with York City Council. We secured some funding through the EGI group for a mental health first aid instructor course, and we talk about inclusion and the disability that was mentioned in the slide there. Quite a lot of people come into the service and maybe don't state that they've got you know, mental health disorder or a condition as such. So it was breaking them barriers and the stigma down, and myself and another station manager, mental health first instructors. And through COVID, we managed to put out 32 mental health first aiders who were successful of passing the course into the service. And they're out there now delivering training to the stations or helping people on an informal basis where they can. The best feedback from that course that we have had is actual operational staff using it like on the front line. So they've attended an incident, they've been on the course and they've now understood that person's needs better, and they've actually been able to handle the situation a lot better since having the training. So that's hopefully something we're looking at continuing to run and get down to like a 1 in 4 mental health first aider in the service. Another project we've been looking at is the point of entry tests for selection tests for the recruitment, and that's all been people impact assessed and reviewed to ensure that we've got no barriers to anyone that's joining the service. That's not whether you're a minority group, that's just there's no barriers to our point of entry tests, and people can have the best success rate as possible. There has been a big increase in people impact assessments from managers, which is really great to see. Rather than the networks prompting people or you know, human resources prompting for the people impact assessments, they're now just getting sent to the EGI board for review, which is really good. There's obviously still a little bit of work to go on that with health and safety as well, but seeing the increase is really good. looking into the future, we've got the facilities review that we've been part of, which is a really big step and really great to see. So everyone, every station will be up there and ready for every member of staff. And the network that I'm part of has been really well supported by managers, by human resources, and now by the enabled team. So we've kind of got a brilliant relationship with the net and looking to really do some fantastic future plans with a scheme we've got going. I'll leave that there, and I'm going to pass over to Nikki. Happy to take any questions.
On mute. Thanks, Emily.
Sorry, Nikki, just 1 second. Has any colleagues got any questions? Are we happy to press on? I think the only thing I would say, Emily, we're just keen in terms of the changes to the estate. We want those doing sooner rather than later. And obviously, in terms of the training, we want to ensure that all those things remain on track, really. And I'm concerned that some of the stuff might just have drifted a little bit. I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that's going on internally from the network lead. So we've delivered some EDI training at training centre, and there's been some workshops delivered locally on district as well by the talent team, which have been really successful. I know moving forward, I won't steal Nikki's kind of thunder. She'll probably want to share what she's looking into. So I'll leave that there and pass you over to Nikki. Okay,
fine. Nikki, the floor is yours.
Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. So in terms of some of the support that's now available, managers now have access to our Enable services. So this comes with some really specialist and expert advice to all staff and managers, including our talent and diversity team as well. We're developing a diversity toolkit. So this is going to allow staff and managers to access specific information around EDI 24/7. It'll have information on all protected characteristics, support networks, external links, all in one central hub. So that's currently in development, and we expect that to be launched next year. With regards to business insight, we are providing managers with quarterly business insights. So this can really help managers take action from specific, up-to-date and relevant data. We've recently launched a new online applicant tracking system this year as well. This has been rolled out across most fire departments already, and it's soon to be launched for our on-call recruitment as well. And what this will do is it's significantly going to improve our ability to actually monitor and report on diversity of applications into the service. Next year, we're also looking to launch a staff engagement survey. This is going to feature EDI themes as well. And again, this insight will be then shared with managers, coupled with some EDI focus groups that are due to start in the next few months, providing the service with some real qualitative data as well, again, which can be fed back into managers. And we intend on holding these quarterly to act as sort of pulse information throughout the year. We touched a little bit on training then. So we really, with regards to training, we know that how important it is that we really standardise knowledge and skills across the organisation. So we're really keen to encourage shared learning, the ethos of sort of educating each other. And we also think this will help with retention because people often want to learn and develop their own skills and knowledge. We've already rolled out some EDI training, and this is set to continue. And the service has actually recognised the importance of training, and positively we've secured some funding to invest in training in 2022 for everyone in the organisation, so that's quite exciting. We're also going to be providing refresher training on things like unconscious bias. We've organised some training for newly appointed managers, our Leading the Way programme. So this is a programme specifically designed to support colleagues with their own continuous personal development. We've also got our Shine programme. So this is a new development initiative specifically for Black, Asian and minority ethnic colleagues. Exploring leadership, understanding strengths and increasing their confidence as well. I think it's really important to mention as well that everything we do is underpinned by our service values and our core code of ethics, specifically around promoting EDI and really embracing inclusion. what we wanted to do is to sort of bring you some real life insight as well. So I'm going to hand over to Chris Neal, who's going to be able to give you some insight on some of the work that's actually happening in the districts. So if we could move on to the next slide as well, please.
Okay, and I've got a question on recruitment, Nikki. Who's best to address that to?
Yeah, I can hopefully answer that one for you.
Okay, so just on recruitment, obviously, and quite recently I went to look at the fire station over at Borough Bridge, and there's a great banner outside saying wanted on-call firefighters, and it was just a great banner. I just wondered, in terms of recruitment, what other techniques you're using, because that's quite old-fashioned in many respects. It's obviously a traditional thing that you've inherited, but if you really want to reach out to women firefighters, which I definitely want to see more recruited, and also more diverse members of the community joining us, what techniques are you using to attract those individuals?
Yeah, absolutely. And in the essence of time, actually, I'm going to cover that in the next slide.
Okay, well, that's fine then, and we can cover it off then, but I'm very keen to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so my name's Chris Neal. I'm the head of Harrogate and Craven. I wanted to talk about some district successes and really kind of delve down into some of the things that we've been doing over in the west of the county. My area covers both Harrogate and Craven. I think it's really important to mention at this stage that there's at least one female firefighter on every single of my 11 stations, which is something that I'm incredibly proud of, but also acknowledge that it's not enough, and we need to be far better at being more diverse and really representing our communities. Now, 51% of the people in North Yorkshire are female, and so there's a good reason why we want to attract those people into service. We are spending a huge amount of time as a district command team emphasising the values and the language that people are using, and the importance of attracting a diverse workforce. We spent a great amount of time out in the community during events such as International Women's Day, explaining to people that female members of the public are really welcome to join North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue, and we would love them to join. They add so much value to the organisation. Something that I'm quite interested in: 75% of females with dependent children work, whereas 92% of males with dependent children work, and that leaves us a huge gap. So one of the things that we've been looking at, in particular in the West, is the disparity between males and females, but also the actions that we can take. So we've been talking to various schools in the west of the county to see if the people who have a caring responsibility, which unfortunately in our society today includes mostly women, to see whether they would be interested in joining, in particular, the on-call fire service. And we would guarantee that they would be back in time to pick their kids up from school, or some other after-school clubs would pick up the slack, and we would guarantee that they would be back in time to pick their children up from after-school clubs. This would obviously increase the numbers within district. We're at early stages yet, but we are seeing some positive noises. And actually, in the November course that we're running for on-call firefighters, to bring them up to a skill level where they can be on fire engines, we have at least 5 who are in the frame from the west to join the service. So we are making improvements. We're not there yet, but we have been doing quite a lot of work with other organisations to try and encourage women in particular to join the fire service. Now, we've also been running positive action days, have a go days. Every single fire station has run one of those within the west, with the exception of Lofthouse, which is a volunteer station, and they have been successful. Most of the recruitment that I've just talked about has been on the back of those have a go days. And I would expect to see an increase in female recruits across the on-call as the actions that we're taking really kick in. One of the things that we're really struggling with, though, is public perception, and I think this is where everybody can help. And I want to give you an example of a piece of positive action that took place in Summerbridge fairly recently. One of my station managers was out and about in the community, knocking on people's doors, speaking to individuals, and trying to push an agenda that anybody can join the fire service. He noticed a young couple in their 20s enter a house, went and knocked on the door. The female answered the door, dressed in gym kit, clearly just been to the gym, and said, "I'm really interested in talking to you about joining Summerbridge fire station as an on-call firefighter. She said, "I'll get my husband." And that for me is a really good example of the barriers that we have to break down within the community. There are still far too many people who see the fire service as a job for white men. We all know that that's not the case, and actually the inclusion of different diverse individuals within the fire service help to strengthen it, help to change our values, and help to push forward an agenda that we're really keen to be involved with. We've also been working with running groups in Harrogate, in particular female running groups. That started off as a conversation around a safe space with the Me Too movement and the very well publicised attacks on women that we've seen, unfortunately, in other parts of the country. But it led into something more, and it led into a conversation around, whether people who lived outside of the Harrogate area but travelled into to join the running club could be part of a conversation around whether they could be on-call firefighters. We're also making contacts with local mosques, having open days, and doing loads and loads of different work around recruitment. We're looking at working with young farmers, and I have to bring up my perceptions as well, which have been broken down. That I considered young farmers to be an organisation full of men, and actually their diversity is far greater than North Yorkshire Fire and Rescues. So we all have lessons to learn in this. We are trying to learn those lessons, and we are making progress. And I welcome any questions at this stage.
I think I've got some, Chris, and I appreciate the work that's going on. I think sort of we need to reach out to women's gyms, places like that, where younger women are involved, and we can maybe sort of make some headway, because you're quite right, some of the older members of the community have a very fixed view in terms of what a firefighter is and isn't. It's one of the challenges, and I think sometimes television programs have helped stereotype that as well. Although I've noticed that some of the stuff like the West Yorkshire Fire Service are trying to kick back against that. I mean, I'm happy to share ideas with you, but you've obviously got some already that you're rolling out. But I think we just need it to make it clear to women that we really do want them to join the service. I would take it further and actually go to some of the schools and sixth formers and actually take the engine to the sixth forms and ask them to see if they can lift the ladders and do some of the stuff. You could actually do some of the testing there, and then if you've got an element of engagement, bring them back to an on-call station. Because ultimately you're not going to meet, and this is the problem we have, we're just sort of, just in terms of the service itself, recruiting from the same male white population, you're just not going to meet the numbers that you need, and we're not meeting the numbers in certain stations, and yet we have women within the community and other sort of diverse members of the community who, with the right approach, would actually join and be fantastic members of staff for you.
I agree. I absolutely agree, Commissioner. I would say that we are making progress. I sometimes describe the situation like an oil tanker. It does take an incredibly long time sometimes to turn around. And we also have to consider that certainly in terms of whole-time recruitment, we haven't recruited massive numbers over the last few years, but that is changing. And on the last course, it was pleasing to me to see more female members of staff coming through. We are making progress, but it is going to take time, and we have to accept that. But that's not to say that we can't be ambitious, and I think that the ambition that we need to aim for is to be fully inclusive and fully representative of our communities, which means to me 51% of our operational staff are female.
Yeah, and I think we've got an internal dialogue to have, which you're having, but you've got a journey yet to go with an external dialogue with the community, and I think that is still very early work in progress.
I agree. I agree.
Good. Caroline wants to come in. I think she's got a hand up.
Thank you. I did have a question, but you've just answered that, so thank you. But I just wondered about the journey that you get from role models. Do you track in terms of the recruitment and seeing from those who are there out in the community, and they're representing, say, from a female perspective?
I mean, obviously, every female firefighter is different, and I'm reluctant to use those individuals as look at me role models. Because not everybody wants that, and actually when you speak to quite a lot of them, they merely want to get on with the job and be a firefighter and be considered a firefighter rather than a role model or a special case. I think that there's a tipping point where, and it's starting to happen, where when we have a go day, women turn up thinking, and you can see people. I saw someone at Settle a little while ago who was kind of hovering at the end of the street. There's a female firefighter at Settle who I was chatting to in a fire kit. She took her helmet off, saw the long hair, saw the fact that she was a woman, and you could see, I saw out the corner of my eye this person make a beeline. And she came over, we had a chat. She's now well within the system, and we're hoping that she's on the November course. So I think we can use positive role models. We just need to do it in the right way. And we need to do it in a way that doesn't exclude the individuals that are currently in the service.
Yeah, I just wondered if it was a track that came as people are interested, that they've noted themselves. Actually, it's because of, instead of you putting somebody into the spotlight, that they've actually just provided that feedback.
People do, and people certainly, when we get an initial interest, then that certainly happens, and we almost have a buddy up system, but it's quite informal. I certainly will consider maybe making it a little bit more formal. Thank you for the suggestion. Good.
Okay, I've got some ideas, but I'll share them with you afterwards, Chris, in terms of folks who'd be interested in having a go female-wise. Shall we press on, because I'm just conscious we're drifting a bit on time now. Most of it my fault.
Absolutely. So just to sort of look at what we're trying to achieve in the short and long term, and actually touching on your previous question, Commissioner, we will be reviewing our recruitment processes and strategies. We're looking to ensure that processes are fair, they're robust, they're not biased. We're going to be reviewing recruitment workshops and events, and that's also, looking at some new venues, targeting schools, universities, gyms, like you say, making improvements around reasonable adjustments, and also the exposure of vacancies as well, both for external and internal attraction. So this can be things like our advert placement, the advert wording, to make sure that we really are attracting underrepresented groups across all protected characteristics. One of the main priorities as well will be a review of the branding. So we fully take on board the public perception and that example that Chris gave, which is quite worrying, really. So we want to ensure that our communication is as inclusive as possible, and we can start to break some of the traditional stereotypes with regards to joining the service. There's a lot of work that we want to do, and there's a lot that we want to achieve. So we're in the development of a sort of internal EDI roadmap, so it'll clearly show what we're working towards and what specific activity we've got planned. We're developing things such as a coaching and mentoring academy, which is a mentoring programme for underrepresented groups. The improvements to estates and facilities is continuing. In the short term, we also intend to develop a cohort of diversity champions. So these will be all levels of seniority, operational and non-operational colleagues across all protected characteristics. And slowly what we'll see happen is that our champions will actually be able to help educate our workforce and change culture, which can help with attraction, and it will certainly help with retention as well, and help us to be truly inclusive. And that really ties in with our approach of sort of shared learning and actually enabling our current workforce to become key role models as a diversity champion. Over to Becca, just to touch on some of our longer term ambitions as well.
Thank you, Nikki. Absolutely. So the people strategy and people plan and the fire and rescue plan are going to continue to be the anchor point for longer term action. The aim is to absolutely increase representation, as we've talked through already, in and across the whole workforce in terms of all roles within the service, to continue to increase representation across the service. Further develop targeted recruitment campaigns, and one thing that we've not spoke about as of yet, but Nikki may jump in at any point on this one. There is an on-call review meeting that again John Foster chairs, where a number of stakeholders, for example the district watch managers who are heavily involved in recruitment for local campaigns, I'm going to be looking at some of the ways in which they recruit. So as you've mentioned, Commissioner, around some of the banners which have been seen in some of the local communities, whilst on the face of it, some of it seems potentially traditional, actually what we've found in some of the feedback from some candidates coming through the progress, that in such small local communities, actually the banners or the local conversations or some of the leaflets, for example, have been that thought process starter. So the group that meet for on-call recruitment really review and are going to start to monitor how we're attracting candidates coming through the process, to then monitor some of the trends and measures of success that can then influence future campaigns. So in terms of measuring success, some of the ways in which the service are planning to do that is against the NFCC Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Framework through the quarterly people plan review meetings. So the strategic direction that heads of have set for themselves locally and committing to corporately, quarterly meetings will be had to review progress. So that will be a way in which success is measured. Through the Business Insights report, so as Nikki's touched upon already, that report is the first one that's been launched so far, and trends and analysis will only continue to build. So we'll be able to use that data more effectively to monitor some of the success. Specifically, the Insights report focuses in on things like sickness absence, long and short, recruitment, talent and diversity elements. So it's going to start to build and really allow us to continue to monitor progress. Through the engagement survey, which Nikki's mentioned already, and I'm going to hand back over to John, who's going to talk through some of the action plan and milestones which will continue to support the longer term ambition of the service.
I don't think we can hear you, John.
Can you hear me now? No?
Just about, John.
This is, so apologies, my microphone again. So some really good work going on. The action plan here just sets out really our journey over the next 12 months of where we want to be. The values and the new code of ethics is something that we really got to embedded within the organisation well. And then the other work that's going on there, including the estates upgrade, will form part of our overall strategy here. Just to pick up on a couple of things that we've discussed here today, I just want to reassure to the public as well, we've talked very heavily about positive action, and we are making inroads, we are making progress, we're nowhere near where we need to be, but this is not about reducing and diluting standards. So all of the new women firefighters that came through the whole time process recently, and I'm really pleased to see, you know, a third of the whole time intake there were women. They did so on their own merit. They passed exactly the same standards to gain a place on that course as all the other members do. So I just want that assurance to go out to the public that this isn't about dilution. This is about just attracting the right people forward. There is a new workforce out there now that we can tap into with home workers, and they will support and help with the on-call element where we struggle. So lots of work going on. The action plan there shows where we want to be within the next 12 months. And I'll leave it there, Commissioner. Happy to take any other questions.
Okay, that's good, John. I'm conscious of time and we're running a bit adrift. Tom's got his hand up. Tom, have you got a question?
Just one very quick one, if I may,
Yeah,
Philip, and John, maybe we can send some of the other questions that we've got, just conscious of time, over and publish the responses. My question really, the proof is in the pudding, isn't it? And the $1 million question, going back to your first slide, you know, it's great that so much is going on, but are we seeing the evidence at the other end in terms of how the workforce are responding to this? We've got the HMI finding from last time to kind of judge against, and I guess basic question, do you feel that as a result of all the work you're doing so far, that we are seeing a change in the attitude of staff and middle managers, and that there is a greater understanding starting to develop and emerge about the benefits of diversity, please?
Sorry, can I just add a rider to that, Tom, because you're leading the witness. So the key thing is, John, if you're not, so I want you to answer it honestly, and if you're not seeing the results, I want you to double the efforts to get the messages across, because we are going to be inspected in March, and I want to make sure that the workforce, I've got the message and understand where we're all coming from, and secondly, have bought into the programme as well, which is a harder ask, because those are some of the questions that will get asked.
So, are we seeing a change? Yes, we are seeing a change across the workforce. The fact that we are taking through a number of cases through the disciplinary route could take one of two thoughts on that one. So that you could say, well, if we're having more cases, we've got a larger problem. Or is it the fact that managers are now challenging and taking on the issues? That's where we've got to get to. So we are not tolerating inappropriate behaviour. We are facing it head on, and we are dealing with it. But before we get to that stage, this is about learning. This is about education. That's the end where people just don't get it. What we're doing along the way is making sure that we do all we can to bring the workforce with us, to make it into a learning environment and an inclusive environment. And I think we've set out today where we're heading. Yes, it's not perfect, but the direction of travel is in the right way. And I think some of the surveys that we've got going on will help support to understand a little bit more about that journey as well. So there's no easy process with this, but I think we're heading in the right direction.
Good. Okay. Peter, I'm going to take this as the last question because I am conscious of time now. We're over time and we haven't even got into the report yet for North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue performance. So, brief question.
Yeah, it's a very quick one. It follows on from the last one, really. You've been talking about the learning and the training. How are you checking that learning is being embedded?
It's through a range of different mechanisms, really, Peter. And as we just explained, we need to run some surveys. We need to be engaging more so locally. But those sort of checks and balances are part and parcel of everyday life. So when managers are out and about, but it's not easy just to say we will do a once explicit thing and that measures it. It encompasses a whole range of different elements going forward in how we measure the effectiveness of what we're doing. But ultimately, this will come down to the overall feeling within the workplace, which we're getting good feedback. Engagement is so important about this. We've all got a programme of visits out to stations, and this is where we can start and talk closely with staff to understand the feelings out there, to get a feel of how people are reacting to the overall changes and transformation in the service, of which EDI is a part of.
Okay, are you happy with that, Peter? Good. He's got his thumb into your next bit, which is it's JD, isn't it? The Deputy Chief Fire Officer performance update.
Right, I will try and share my page. 2 seconds, please.
Philip, JD, sorry, could I make the suggestion that we do this by exception? So JD, if there are any specific points within the performance slides that you feel need to be raised as exceptional, that might help us to move through the deck.
In which case then, Tom, yes, and I'll do it without the presentation. There are two key areas that I would focus on within there. The first one being false alarms. Once again, you'll see within the pack, we have seen an increase in false alarms. This is in line with our seasonal spike throughout the summer, and it's predominantly in the York area and also in the Scarborough area. Now, these still relate to premises that have the full installations fitted for alarms. We've got a number of properties, commercial properties, housing associations and hospitals which are having an increase in those alarms. What's going to show the Commissioner, the panel and also the public on is that the service is absolutely on top of everything we need to be and what we're trying to achieve from this. A lot of the issues that are being experienced are as companies are opening up, servicing and also finding issues as they're doing all the testing within there, which some of those, of course, then become unwanted fire signals. On some of the key offenders that we have in there, which includes a housing association, a hospital and commercial properties over in Scarborough, the district managers and the prevention staff are working hard with those properties to reduce or stop the alarms. They are aware of them, they are aware of the issues, and some of these relate to supply or contractual issues with the actual premises. So we're covering everything that we possibly can within the realms of what we're leading to with that area. The second part I will focus onto is around our overall fire cover, which ties into our on-call availability as well. We have seen an increase in the time that we've been within what we term the critical stages, or the red, as it's shown on the charts about our appliances being off the run. Now, the numbers for this, we've done a significant deep dive into the on-call availability and the whole time, the availability and the staffing arrangements across both sides of this. Now, this is a national issue around on-call, as we understand. But one of the things that's impacted further throughout COVID, without the last month, has been on a number of key topics, is long-term sickness throughout the last 2 months. We've seen people obviously taking annual leave over this main period. We've also seen now with the driver situation, companies and employers are offering significant sums of money for their staff to be available, sometimes in the region of £500 per shift for their staff to maintain or be with on there. This impacts on 2 ways. One is that the individuals aren't then available to us for their fire cover. And 2, if they take extra shifts, it then impacts on the driving hours that they're then not available to us or to provide that fire cover. And this is something the National Fire Chiefs Council is working with. And of course, we are working with local employers and what we can do from there. What we've also seen across this period, the August period that this relates to, was also the back end of the pandemic. And as Mark Pannoni stated in there, we aren't out of COVID yet. And we've seen at the end of the self-isolation period and the track and trace was then a number of appliances. And in some instances, 10 personnel within a station were taken off the run due to being a close contact or a defined close contact by the NHS Test and Trace. And of course, that significantly impacts on us. 1 can be an issue, up to 10 across 2 stations, wipes out for a long period our fire cover. Where we've got on-call and hold-time staff on the same stations, that takes those individuals out of hold-time and on-call. So it's a double whammy to us in what we're doing. What we're doing to resolve that, once again, we're working back with local employers to try and make sure that we're mitigating or, where possible, still maintaining the available hours for firefighters. We've wholly supported everybody through COVID, and we will continue to do so, and maintaining our COVID compliance. And we're also working with individuals to see if there's any other further through occupational health or other support that we can do to reduce those sickness periods and get them back to work as quickly as possible. If there are any questions, I'll open it out to the group.
Okay, so I've got a couple of questions, John. First of all, false alarms. And this is not something we can solve this afternoon. I'd like you to look at that, how other forces are dealing with that, and consider whether we should actually be charging people for false alarms. There are some repeat offenders that I'm aware of that consistently do this, and it's costing the service money. It's money we haven't got to spare, and it's at minimum selfish that they don't address these false alarms. And I think we should ultimately end up charging them for them if it's repeat offenders. So I'd like you to look at that and just take it away. And secondly, on-call stations, I'm conscious Settle is at 50% last month. Obviously, that's not an acceptable figure. I know you're taking action on it, but we will pick up on that next month, and I would like to see that there's some improvement.
Just as an immediate point on there, Philip, we do have 8 members of staff at Settle. We've got 4 currently in the system, which will be on the November course, which will significantly bolster the fire cover within that.
Okay, that's a good answer.
Thank you.
Good. Tom, have you got a brief question?
One question, please, Philip. Just on the protection and regulatory side of things, there's been a huge drop off in operationals of the number of inspections by operational crews and staff in over the last couple of months, and I just wondered whether there was an explanation for that, JD.
You're right, and it's a disappointing drop-off, but it's significant between July and August. Now, the work we've done on drawing off from the data, this is a follow-on, unfortunately, from the availability of appliances, where we've got for instance, two appliances at a station where we have an on-call station off. We will move those appliances out to provide that fire cover. If they're not in their area, they cannot complete that work. And obviously, a statutory duty for fire cover is what we will focus on. We wholly agree with you, and we share that, and we are doing everything possible locally because
that makes sense.
Prevention activity is where we focused on.
Okay, well, I think we've covered that off. There's no further questions, John. So thank you for that. Moves on to the final bits. We've no other questions from the public. You'd be pleased to know the date of the next meeting is the 2nd of November. There's not an October meeting. It's the 2nd of November due to annual leave. And there'd be no other business, I don't think. I declare this meeting closed, and thank you all for your inputs today. Greg.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you. Cheers. Thank you, John. Bye.